How does Mark Sargent do all this?
I'll let Karen answer that. She's really chuffed with how he feels about that.
We showed him a bit of our work, and he said he's never seen any work like that. But the good thing is that he's staying, and he's going to come on this big hangout I'm arranging, and also he's going to come to the UK for the Flat Earth convention that we're having, and we've just got Jon now. Hello.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
In the Morgile.
Yeah.
What's up, all? Hey, guys. How y'all doing?
1 second, I'll just come back and say hello because you've been talking to me. I'll just take my camera off so you can see me. And we've got Gary there. Oh, I can't get my camera off for the moment. Is it coming? Here
yeah, I've got what's it called? Electrical tape and covering mine up, and it's disabled as well. I only turn on my camera like if I'm recording. Other than that, I just leave it off because I don't really want the NSA knowing exactly what goes on in my office at all times necessarily.
That's me.
Can mistake your voice anyway, Jon.
No, we can't mistake your voice anyway. I'm Karen. If I just introduce who's here, we've got Billy on the end, who's from America. We've got Dee from the UK. Sorry, do you want to say hello, you guys?
Hey, Bo.
Hello, Jonathan. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Good to meet you, man.
We've got
we spoke before.
Okay, cool.
We've got Frankie from the UK. This is my group partner. He does all the research. Series is from Holland.
Hey, home of Amsterdam.
We've got Blaine, who's in the States like Billy, but he's gone very quiet. And then we've got Patricia from the UK. Do you want to say hello to Patricia?
Hello. Hey, Patricia.
Yeah, so I've just got people turned up at my house. I'm just going to tell them to be quiet. But because I lag so much, I'm just going to take my camera back off. So someone's just come to my house. 1 second. Ellie, I'm on a big hangout. Can you just be quiet, please? Yeah, well, can you shut the dogs up? Right. Dogs started barking. We don't want to hear dogs barking. Oh, I'm back now. I'm just going to try and turn my camera back off because I'm lagging so much. I always have this problem with the camera.
She records it though. That's all.
Yeah, I record it and I can't turn it off right now. So everybody just carry on while I figure out how to get my camera off and shut the dog up.
Well, yeah, so I suppose there's more series talking a little bit about his work at the moment, and he's been asking a few questions. Yeah, I wanted to get Billy in tonight to help him along with some of what he's doing and his thinking. So,
hey, real quick, guys, I'm trying to find a link to the YouTube watch page, and I think Karen sent me one, but it's to a video. What, does anybody have a link to the live stream so I can share it up on Facebook?
It's not actually live stream today. We're just recording it. I usually put them in the group, but I will put.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good.
Oh,
Good. Okay, I thought it was a live stream. Excellent. Okay. Well, then you can just edit out me seeming foolish. No, I'm kidding. I don't care. That's good.
We're all the fun.
Yeah, so don't worry. It's just being. But I've started to put these things out on YouTube. We were gonna keep quite quiet because Series is doing research, but we're getting to the stage now where obviously we're talking to more people, etc., etc. So I've started to put them out on my channel. But we did have a book club.
You broke up a bit there. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I'm trying to turn my camera off, aren't I? 1 second, let me turn. It's being a bit slow. Go. I think that's. typical, isn't it? Typical tonight it's going to play up. We have our video club, and we actually did your video, the bombshell one. And obviously I've just talked to you, and with our own research, we have problems with people understanding what series is doing. So we understand that it was probably quite difficult to explain, and it's also such a deep subject. So I just wondered if you would, because you altered it, didn't you?
No, I didn't alter it. I made an update to it, which I sort of had planned on doing anyway, because it's not really complex of a problem with the heliocentric model. Very hard to explain, right? So in the first video, I spent more than half of it just sort of setting up and explaining what the heliocentric theory entails in terms of the ecliptic plane and the equatorial plane and the seasons and, you know, those alignments and misalignments. And the point was proven accurately in the first video, although I could see where some people got confused, and there was of course a lot of trolls just arguing semantical points. But ultimately the correction video, I just had to make 3 corrections, 2 of which were just mere technical errors in diagrams, so they didn't change, you know, the outcome or the claim or the problem, you know, that was being described. And the third correction that I made was, it was another insignificant, you know, the moon apparently remains bouncing between the tropics, or bouncing overhead of the tropics over the course of a month. And of course, the tropics are like 25 degrees north and south. I'm sorry, 23.5 degrees north and south of the equator. And of course, the moon travels just slightly north and south of the tropics overhead. So like about 28 and some change degrees north and south of the equator. So for all intents and purposes, you can say that the moon stays overhead of the tropics at all times, spending most of its time more or less aligned to the equatorial plane, although you know, that minor correction absolutely has no effect whatsoever on the outcome of the problem that I was describing. So in that terms, you know, the first part of the bombshell update were just a few minor corrections, and that's fine. The second part of it was that there was a lot of trolls and shills in the comment section who were arguing the same points ad nauseum. And their points that they were arguing were just arguments in semantics, basically arguing semantics regarding the equatorial plane and the ecliptic plane, putting words in my mouth like parallel when I never used the word parallel or implied it. But, you know, just basically just totally arguing semantics and completely failing to mention even the word the moon in any of their arguments, when the entire bombshell video was about the orbital path of the moon. Because, again, just to sort of recap real quick, the moon apparently, if you follow it throughout the month and over the course of months, it will be overhead of the tropical areas. So, you know, it moves from the Tropic of Capricorn north across the equator to the Tropic of Cancer, and then back down to Capricorn over the course of a month. Practically speaking, it does, you know, go a little bit north and south of the tropics. But with that being said, the equatorial plane is, you know, obviously described by the equator. And with this information in light, you can practically say that the moon is a tropical phenomenon. It's always overhead of somewhere within the tropics. And again, just by simple arithmetic, it would spend the majority of its time aligned or more or less aligned to the equatorial plane than it would either of the two tropics. You know, just by simple arithmetic, it would stay more or less in the middle for the most part. Now, the bombshell is, though, that according to the heliocentric model, the moon orbits the ecliptic plane, aligned to the ecliptic plane, plus or minus 5 degrees. So there is a 5-degree alleged divergence between the moon's orbital plane and the Earth's orbital plane. However, the ecliptic plane and the equatorial plane are two completely different things, and they are divergent lines. especially during the solstices, when not only are they divergent, but they are completely misaligned according to an observer on Earth. And so, the tilt of the Earth and the rotation or the orbit of the Earth is allegedly what causes seasons in the heliocentric model, and this can be described as an alignment between the equatorial plane and the ecliptic during the equinoxes, and a maximum misalignment between the equatorial plane and the ecliptic during the solstices. Now, so far, all that is really just only setting up for the main premise, which again has to do with the moon adhering to the ecliptic plane, which means that it couldn't possibly be strictly an overhead of the tropical body. The fact that we can see the moon remaining more or less strictly overhead of the tropics doesn't work in the heliocentric model, where they claim that the moon is orbiting more or less aligned to the ecliptic. Now, one of the next, and I'll let someone else get a word in edgewise, I promise, but then, of course, after I made the bombshell video, then the trolls and shills start making claims that I believe that the moon can only be seen from the tropics, which is just a load of you-know-what, because, we could see, say, the North Pole star from basically the equator, or we'll say the Tropic of Cancer, right? We could see the North Pole star from there, but that doesn't mean the North Pole star is overhead of the Tropic of Cancer. And so, of course, the argument that I'm claiming that the moon is only visible from the tropics is just ridiculous. The moon remains overhead of the tropics at all times, bouncing between the tropics over the course of a month. So, the bombshell argument definitely stands. It is a huge, huge blow to the heliocentric theory. There is no argument against this, and so instead of arguing the points, that video and the follow-up video just got inundated with trolls, shills, Flat Earth Math, whom I'm sure you guys are familiar with, had a big, long thing to say on that, and we had a little bit of a discussion, and he was actually wise enough to remove his comment because apparently he realized how foolish he was, and he realized that the point that I raised was 100% a valid contradiction in the heliocentric model. In fact, it completely refutes the heliocentric model, and they have no explanation for this. And this is independent of the whole other thing that I did recently regarding the moon's phases being sometimes impossible. Like, for example, the 100% fully lit moon during broad daylight is not possible in the heliocentric model, just as a 3% crescent moon is not possible to be visible well after, 2 hours after sunset, according to the heliocentric model. So, the more we look at this, man, it's just the ball Earth model just gets worse and worse and worse in terms of probability, and the flat Earth just has this never-ending mountain of empirical physical evidence, as well as a preponderance of circumstantial evidence that I just don't see how anyone can frankly hold on to the globe Earth position after being exposed to all of this information for the last 2 years, at least in my case.
Yeah, in a way you would think, why do they actually work from a model instead of work from reality to let reality present the model itself, Thinking the other way around. Taking the data,
Copernicus based his whole model off of postulation and circumstantial
Look,
evidence.
excuse me, series. Wilson started now. Wilson, we've got Wilson from Canada. He's on my phone. He just wants to say something. We've also got Gary's joined in. Gary from the UK's joined in. Hey, Wilson, go on then. Say what you were going to say.
First, Morgile, what do I call you? What's your name?
John.
You can just
John.
say
John. Very well, very good presentation. I enjoyed what you had to say. A lot of the things that get put out in the world and the concerns of a theoretical stance have been all Hollywood kind of stylized videos. It was you, Dave Murphy, and Santos Bonacci, Michael Tellinger, men like that presented your facts in a very professional way. I appreciate that. All I said was a comment. Basically, everybody goes off the Copernican postulation, I should call it, to say that this postulation has lasted more than 500 years is not scientific. And here we are as a community saying to the community, let's take a look at it. Let's actually take a look at it. And nobody wants to say nothing because, well, now we got it written in books, and all of a sudden those paper documents, they're more important than what we are. So when I see people making a stance on it, regardless of if things turned out and we were all wrong, it wouldn't matter, because we still stood up like scientists and said, well, we're taking a look at it. So the point is really not that we're proving anything, it's that we're doing what science should have been doing in the first place. We're doing what science should be doing in the first place. Reevaluating, reaffirming, and reconfirming what information is valid and what information is not. So I think it's an awesome job. Everybody's doing a really awesome job.
Yeah, what I would say is I totally agree. I was just writing in a post, and I'm including, you know, something to this effect in the book that I'm working on. But, you know, science, real, practical, physical science is a tool that really, if you boil it down, is best used or best described as the process of elimination through rational experimentation. So, in other words, science is a tool to disprove things. That's really all that it can do conclusively, is disprove hypotheses. Now, when you're dealing with practical, physical, tangible things that we can study and, you know, make predictions with, science can essentially, with the preponderance of evidence and physical experiment, can, you know, prove a model in certain ways, or prove an idea, or prove a thing in certain ways, and it can disprove all of the other hypotheses or disprove any arguments against that thing. However, there could come in the future some other hypothesis that frankly shows the previous belief to be wrong. And so even in that sense, you know, science is a method of process of elimination, if nothing else. And that's practical science. Now, when you're dealing
I like that science is do-it-yourself package to make anything empirical, because only experience makes you actually realize at the essence of what the theory presents.
right,
Empirical around yourself, instead of being dependent on scientism church as being an authority that has done it for you.
right, and yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. What I was going to say too was, you know, so like, okay, so you've got practical science, which is stuff that we can measure and we can tangibly, you know, pick up and weigh and whatever. But when you get into any of the theoretical sciences, which I call hypothetical lions, and that's everything from theoretical astrophysics on the macroscopic level, right down to theoretical atomic physics and molecular physics, which is again theoretical. You know, you can't pick up and play with or measure or weigh or do experiments on an atom, just the same as you can't pick up and measure or weigh and do experiments on a star. And so in much the same way, you know, we have physical science, which is definitely the best method to progress technology and to prove things and disprove things. And that's why we have, you know, airplanes and telecommunications, is because of practical science. But unfortunately, people confuse practical science with theoretical science. And frankly, I don't even think we should call theoretical physics any sort of science. We should call it, you know,
First you have
hypothetical conjecture and hyperbole based on philosophical preference is more along the lines of it.
Did my screen just freeze?
Know to be?
No, you're
Everything's
okay.
quiet. Everything got quiet for a second. I was like, did my screen just freeze? Yeah.
No, I was just
Good
giving someone
stuff,
else a
good
chance
stuff.
to talk. That's all.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say quickly as well, yeah, I just put a link in for a video for Mark there, John, but you might want to look at it as well. It's called Moon Race. It was done by Dave Marsh. I think it's quite an important one and goes along kind of with your bombshell video, to be honest.
I wanted to drop an observation on everybody. Somebody had tried to debunk this whole thing, and I was watching videos. Now, I have more of a tendency now to watch videos that are trying to debunk Flat Earth than I am watching videos about Flat Earth, because I'm like, what do they have to say, really? So I'm watching this video, and someone's talking about how the Earth is a shadow, and that's what creates the moon's dark side. But I'm standing there in the middle of the day. I'm looking up at the moon, and I can see it very visibly with my eyes. And I'm looking up at the sun, and I'm looking at how the moon has the crescent on it. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the shadow coming from? Is there some kind of magical convergence of mass that comes from does the sun? Does the Earth put off a magical shadow that casts across the sun and creates this this curvature pattern across the moon? I'm completely baffled by the argument that the Earth is creating this shadow across the moon. I mean, it blows my mind. And then my mind goes to the very fact that if you say that the sun is 98 million miles away, then its saturation effect is 98 million miles of square space that it is saturating with light. How come only half of the Earth gets saturated with light? That none of it makes any sense whatsoever. So when I hear arguments, I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, either somebody is extremely obtuse and wants to believe, just simply wants to believe, or I must be insane.
Don't forget, we're a
I have
speck
to
of
be
dust.
insane.
We're a speck of dust, aren't we, to the sun?
Yes, apparently. So in the heliocentric model, if you consider 98 million miles away and the amount of saturation not only the Earth gets, if you look at the Mars mission. Now, the first thing I noticed about the Mars mission wasn't the only thing, but the first thing I noticed was, why is it so bright on Mars? Why is it so bright on Mars, for one? And for two, why is it so damn wet? And then people are talking about there's no air on the moon. So there's no air on the moon. How the hell do they leave a footprint? It should be like sand. So all these things pop up in my brain, and I'm like, I'm calling bullshit. Like all day long, I'm just calling bullshit. And I'm watching these videos, and I'm like, they have nothing to say. Every single time I talk to a person who's a complete globalist, they have nothing really to say. As a matter of fact, 90% of flat earthers learn more about a heliocentric universe than they ever did and ever known before. So, we're getting educated on the heliocentric model, and then we're getting educated on the geocentric model, and then we're getting educated on the fact that we don't really know exactly what kind of model is. We know in perception that we live on a flat plane, but we really actually don't know what that is. We only know a percentage of what that could be, or what the possibilities of that means. So I'm really wondering what the hell is going on in the world. At one point, I don't want to believe that there's people that are actually sitting out there thinking up things and thinking up ways to be deceptive. But in that aspect, when my brain goes into those directions, I'm like, what is there? We do have a queen sitting on a throne. We do have the Vatican. We do have the government all over the world. We do have a monetary system that's completely useless. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just generally believe that people want to be good, and maybe I'm wrong about that. I hope that I'm not, to be honest with you. I really do, and I think that it's just a lot of ignorance. But it's a very messed up world, and I'm starting to find that parts of this world, well, parts of the people in this world kind of frighten me quite a bit. And this agitation that comes up, if I say it's flat, I could say that I believe in alien ghosts from Uranus, and nobody would bat an eye. But if I say flat Earth, man, people hate me. Absolutely hate me. They're like, you're an idiot. You're a fucking idiot. And then they start talking about Nibiru. I'm like, come on, you're calling me an idiot? That's insane.
The craziest thing about all that, and I totally get what you're saying. Like I did, God, almost 2 years ago. I did a debate on the Art Bell show, Midnight in the Desert, against a Harvard physics professor who works with NASA. And Art Bell, if you're not familiar with the show, will sit there and talk to people who claim that they are, reptilian shapeshifters from the future. And he'll sit there and have a conversation with them as if everything they're claiming is true. They won't ask them any critical questions. But when you get on there and start talking about the obvious, plain, simple truths that the Earth isn't a spinning ball, you get just incredulous knee-jerk reaction that people think that you're some kind of an idiot. But the thing is, that's programming. It isn't knowledge. It's just people's programming kicking in. And you're absolutely right that I grew up very interested in science and interested in the planets and NASA. And every year for Christmas, I put on my list to Santa Claus either a chemistry kit or some kind of the science kit. I was way into science, and I got to tell you, I learned more, and I went all the way through high school and did college, but I learned more about the heliocentric model in 2 years looking into flat Earth than I did in my entire rest of my life, allegedly learning about theoretical physics and astrophysics, which ought to say something. Like, just as an example, I don't remember ever learning the curvature calculation, the curvature formula, ever in my entire life, in my entire education, let alone did we ever demonstrate that or put it into practice in any sort of experiment. However, it was towards the end of my junior year, our shop class or whatever had spent about a month building little miniature rockets from scratch that we launched off at the end of the year. So that kind of goes to show you where our educational system lies. And when you've got people like physics professors like Dr. Gridley, who I debated, that they've spent their whole lives basically believing in Santa Claus, and that the whole thing has been reinforced ever since, I believe it started around the time of, at the end of World War II, with Operation Paperclip, when you had a migration or a smuggling of thousands of Nazi scientists and propagandists into America and given high profile positions. And they spearheaded NASA, but ever since that point, now the Nazis, the Germans, apparently did go to the Antarctic for some reason prior to the end of World War II. And one of the first things that America did after inserting all of these German scientists into our political and scientific culture was Operation High Jump. We did this huge excursion to Antarctica. And at that point, according to what Richard Byrd said, if you believe him, Antarctica is a huge landmass, whether it's a globe or flat, a huge landmass that's full of all sorts of coal and oil and uranium and gold and pretty much anything you can think of that would be interesting to corporations. And you would expect to have seen a huge migration of corporate and military interests down to the Antarctic. But instead, we got the Antarctic Treaty, and they started rolling out films or TV shows like Lost in Space and Star Trek. They rolled out LSD, and then they rolled out the Apollo missions. And so the whole thing was basically a 20 or 30-year plan. You also had the Vietnam War right in the middle of all this too, so that was a huge diversion. But this is a 20 or 30-year plan, assuming that they learned for sure that the Earth is flat in 1945 during Operation High Jump. Within the next 20, 30 years, we had men landing on the moon, allegedly proving that the moon is a spherical terra firma object just like Earth. And so their mission was accomplished at that point by satisfying or cementing people's belief in a spinning ball Earth almost forever. And, you know, frankly, I'm still shocked that people were awakened to this, because I was so heavily indoctrinated in this. I never would have thought of it, even though I've seen throughout my life and realized certain things that don't match up to the heliocentric theory. It never would have occurred to me to even second guess this stuff. And so, you know, to me, in my personal opinion, it's really just the hand of God opening people's eyes to this. This is revelation, and frankly, I'm just glad to be even a small part of it. You know, for every 10,000 negative comments I get, I may get one person, or maybe more than one, but one person that says, you know, I was a globe believer, I trolled flat earthers, and I saw a couple of your videos. You know what? I totally get it now, and I'm a flat earther now. And just one of those is worth 10,000, you know, go drink bleach and jump off the buildings.
Yeah, well, you're definitely one of the very few people, and I'm very picky about what I see. If you're not making sense to me when you're talking, and if you get on to too much metaphysical states, I end up drifting off a little bit, thinking, okay, I don't want to really listen to this. This is not making any sense to me. So a lot of the points that you made and a lot of the things you talk about, it helped reinforce my desire to really look hard, because I think it's mostly that denial factor kicks in, and you don't want to have your perspective look at that just in case it's true. I think everybody really believes that this is true, but most people just don't, like, they have trouble moving past their programming. They don't want to go past their programming because it's a comfort zone. If I could, you mentioned and you touched on something that really stuck in my mind. When I was a kid, I remember we used to talk about the rainforest, the Brazilian rainforest, and how they were cutting and tearing this down. They showed us videos of these guys with the biggest chainsaws I've ever. My father, he was a woodsman when I was a kid, so I know chainsaws, but this was a massive chainsaw that hangs from a harness on your body, and they were cutting down trees like it was going out of style. We live in a society that would tear down thousands and thousands of acres of trees with indigenous life everywhere, with all sorts of kind of things in it that we know nothing about. But Admiral Byrd comes back and says, in Antarctica, there's no indigenous life, but there is enough resources to last us a lifetime. We put up signs saying no entry. Not gonna happen. Not in this lifetime. And as for like them going to the moon, this happened in 1969. You're telling me if they could actually do that, they wouldn't have a commercial entity doing that right now, making millions of dollars off of commercial flights to a space station built up there instead of some small ISS trailer park style NASA ship floating around the outer layer doing God knows what up there.
With loads of wires sticking out everywhere, inside and out.
Yes. And there was a technician, an electrician, who seen this video and said there's no way that an electrician, that any sensible electrician went in there and hooked all that up and said this is a good job. Wires are all over the place. The place looks like a death trap. It's just floating around up there. And I brought up the point before about do a hard dock. Every time NASA sends up new astronauts, they do what's called a hard dock. We're talking about an object moving at 1,700 miles per hour going around the Earth. It's basically on autopilot, and they do a hard dock. And when they do this hard dock, you have to try and think now. You're going to shoot an arrow at a bullet, and when the arrow hits the bullet, if it manages to miraculously hit the bullet, it doesn't change its trajectory. It doesn't do anything to it whatsoever. Never mind the fact that when they actually dock onto it and do this hard dock, you're changing the weight of the object. Now you're going to change the barometric pressure, because as soon as you open up the doors, there's going to be an airflow going from one container to the next. So all sorts of things are happening, and I'm like, I'm not a scientist, but I can point this out. What the hell is going on? Like, why would anybody in their right mind believe that a shuttle with no propulsion is going to catch up to something that's going 1,700 miles per hour hard dock, not cause any problem with trajectory, and not do anything whatsoever? And then back to my previous point about the rainforest and an entire place where it's accessible, there's no animals to kill, there's nothing to bother you from digging and getting natural resources over there, and we just close it off? No, it's like red flag city. There's nothing but a huge red flag with bullshit written across it, caution lines saying, these people are retarded. Literally retarded. Or there's something much bigger. Much, much bigger.
Yeah. You know, and you brought up a couple of good points, man. Like, I'll give you an example. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the strip mining that they're doing, like in the eastern, I guess, Appalachian Blue Ridge Mountains in America. But basically, they've pulled out all the coal for most of the mountains. You know, they've dug under the mountains and pulled out most of the coal, but there's still a lot of coal left in the mountains. And so what they do, and now mind you, these are some of the most beautiful mountain ranges you'll find in all of America. And it's just beautiful territory, natural wildlife. What they do is they literally take like thousands of pounds of dynamite and other explosives and literally level and flatten entire mountain ranges to where it looks like you're standing on, like, I don't know, a pretend Mars scape. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, one of the Kennedy guys, I forget his first name, but he was a real advocate against this. But you've got these companies who are, going after every last ounce of coal and destroying, natural national treasures like these mountain ranges by literally, if you watch videos of strip mining, it's just terrible. And I grew up in, I was born in Virginia. I lived there the first 8 years of my life, and I also went to college in Virginia. And so, like, the Shenandoah Valley, for thank God they haven't touched, but that's really like some of the most beautiful sights you'll ever see, and they're destroying this stuff just to get a little bit of coal out of what's left in the mountain by just destroying the mountain. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense for them to do that. It makes a lot of sense for them to drill for oil off the coast of in the Gulf of Mexico and just spill trillions of gallons a second into the Gulf, poisoning the waters, ruining the Louisiana fishing industry for years. Just, all these disasters that we've seen in terms of, you've got the whole Keystone Pipeline thing where they're basically, the federal government is stealing people's land in order to pump oil, from Canada down to the United States or to Mexico. And yet, Antarctica remains completely untouched. Oh, and let's not forget that we've been buying petroleum or crude oil from our so-called state enemies for how many centuries, and yet Antarctica remains untouched. So this really doesn't make any sense whatsoever from a strategic or from a national, sovereignty sort of standpoint. Now, another thing that you had mentioned was, again, when we're young, we're told about curvature and we're told about the Earth spinning, but it's never demonstrated and we never feel it, we never see it, it's never really proven, it's just theory. But when we're adults, if someone shows us evidence that there is no curvature and the damn thing isn't spinning, then it's not necessarily up to us to have a model. The first reaction to once you realize there's no curvature and it's not spinning is you have to go through your own personal checklist of heliocentric theory values, because there really is an intricate web of mechanisms, that involve or entail the heliocentric theory, and all of these little working parts are said to explain everything. But upon closer inspection, once you have this fundamental knowledge that there's no curvature and the Earth is stationary, then every last bit of the heliocentric model that you really look at, think about logically, and try to disprove, which, by the way, that is what science does, you'll find that it just falls apart. Now, another thing you mentioned was the ISS being an electrical nightmare. What about the fact that the thing's been up there 15, 16 years, even though it was only supposed to be up there a few years, but it's never grounded out? All electrical circuits have to ground out at some point. Airplanes, they use electrical circuits, and they build up a static electric charge, which they store in capacitors. But when the plane lands, it instantly grounds out. So you're telling me that the ISS has been up there running gobs of electricity for 15 years, never grounded out, and yet they've never had one single complete electrical failure due to static electric overload? That is just obvious bull. Another thing is the hatches inside. I beg you to find one single video of NASA within, or Roscosmos within the ISS, where one single hatch is closed. And if you ask anybody in the Navy, if you're in a submarine or even in a ship, but especially in a submarine, if you don't close every hatch behind you, like, first of all, they'll give you a warning, then they'll put you in the brig, which is like jail. Because, if one portion of a pressurized environment like a submarine or like the ISS even gets a slight puncture, it is a system-wide disaster unless you have each area tightly sealed and cordoned off. And I'll tell you, you'll never find one single closed hatch in the NASA footage of the interior of the ISS. You will see what appear to be closed hatches, which are merely the end of the set. It's the back of the third wall. That's all that it is, but it isn't actually a closed hatch that you can open and travel through. And one final thing I just wanted to mention is, you were talking about the ISS being like a trailer park in space. That's funny. I've never heard that. But what's funny to me is they've never had one single major problem that couldn't be fixed on the ISS ever, in spite of things like micrometeoroids, which could be anywhere from the size of a flea to the size of an eraser, to the size of a baseball, to the size of a basketball. But even if it was the size of a pencil eraser, if it's going relatively, say, 20,000 miles an hour compared to the ISS itself, then it's going to puncture a hole straight through the ISS, even if the material is relatively soft due to the velocity. And if that was to happen, and they had all of their hatches open, the entire ISS would be instantly ruined. It would be finished. All of that pressure would escape instantly, and it would the astronauts would be sucked out of that hole, making a larger hole, and they never close the hatch. It makes no frickin' sense. Oh, and the one problem that they have had in terms of spacewalks was the astronauts nearly drowning in space, and they came up with an ingenious plan to use snorkels.
Yeah.
So
I like it.
I've said it's a store cupboard. It looks like a store cupboard. All those wires, the most dangerous thing. And then I've noticed.
Well, I like that you brought that up, Karen, because anybody here who has a TV and a few systems hooked up, it is an absolute nightmare. Don't even touch them or move them. It's a nightmare going behind your TV. For some reason, without being touched, they all seem to tangle. tangle and mess together, and it's just a nightmare. This is a complete nightmare.
I've been going through some of the footages. I found a paused astronaut outside. One's moving around, the other one's paused, which means they weren't there together. This was supposed to be live, and it's CGI. And then the shadow on the one that's moving doesn't look right either. And then I've seen I've seen the flippers. I've seen a torch in the background waving around when they're supposed to be outside live. Someone else is there with a torch. The astronauts, one's hair is normal, the other one's back brushed and looks like a witch. Wouldn't the collars on their shirts move? You know, you just have to look at even just a few of the footages. You could see all the mistakes. Noise. There's loads of noise. You wouldn't hear a noise. You can hear metal things banging around out there. Bang, bang, bang. This wouldn't happen in a vacuum. It's just ridiculous.
Hey,
But,
guys, listen, I don't know how long y'all have been on here, but I have to go walk my little pooch real quick. If you guys are going to be on a while, I'll just stay on and mute myself, but my little puppy dog has to go outside, so I got to walk
I'm
her
sure
real
we'll
quick.
be here.
Okay, I'll be right back. It probably won't take me but 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't usually take her long.
We'll be here.
All right, we'll be waiting.
Okay.
I gotta
problem.
check out my
I'll
nephew.
be right
He just
back.
sent me a
I'll be right
message.
back, guys. Sorry.
That's okay. Stay on and come back.
Okay.
Silence
Hugs and
now.
kisses. Hi, everybody.
Hello, Wilson. So, what?
Yeah, weird that the phone is a better connection than the actual hangout.
Yeah, Billy, are you still there?
Yes.
Were you
That
enjoying
would be
that?
great if people like Morgile and some of these bigger channels would take a look at this. I was just viewing some of those videos on the moon race that Dave Marsh had posted, and it's just unbelievable. It makes a lot of sense. It fills in a lot of gaps. And, you know, I would like to see this flat earth awakening, that people really start to consider other people's ideas instead of just sitting if a lot of globers were presented with the 4D toroidal model, a lot of these people are pretty book smart and they might be able to see it, but they're just not able to see the A&E map with the sun and moon circling. And I can see why they have problems on believing flat earth. I really do.
The first phrase on my website is not divided, not conquered, not in chaos, not under control, not a circle, not a ball. Squaring the circle and freedom in order, though.
Wow. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and you haven't even got to see Series' work yet. You've only seen maybe a little bit of it. You haven't seen all his work.
Well, I know, but like I said, it already it's starting to explain a lot. I've been thinking about it. Like I said, I almost went in off the deep end into La La Land over this, and you know, I knew there was more to it than what was being presented. Now, whether these people are just naive and they're not thinking it out, or they're deliberately misleading people, and that's sad. And I don't want any part with people that are deliberately misleading people. If they're willing to look at the evidence and be open-minded, then if they have a grasp on reality and critical thinking, they should see these things relatively quickly. And once they're explained, I know it's very complicated, but still, once it's explained in the littlest, slightest bit.
Well, actually, Billy, your dreams come true right now, because the very person you were talking about, Dave Marsh, and his video, he's just joined the Hangout.
I would like to point something out. Who's the gentleman that's talking?
I just subbed to his channel. I left him a comment. I couldn't believe it. It's not. I was listening, but I was just watching the screen, reading all the things in the video that he posted, and it just blew me away. It was unbelievable.
Could I just say that Billy wants to hear a bit more about your video, Dave, and you've now joined, and Jon Morgile has just taken his dog for a walk, so he'll be back in a minute. But Wilson, what did you want to say?
Did anybody watch this briefing with NASA technicians? The people in the audience seem to be well versed on trajectory, on map, and on targeting systems, and how this worked. And it seemed that the panel had no idea how to answer their questions. I was completely blown away. It was almost like they were the crew of the Star Trek Enterprise, and kids were like asking them questions about how the lithium crystals actually work. Like it was very, very entertaining and comedic value. I mean, this guy that's speaking now, he sounds like an intelligent man to me. It seems like he's very much in tune with the idea that things are not quite like they've been put out. So he's looking at it from a very subjective, I'm not going to take a solid stance until the evidence is produced sort of way. Did anybody see that video? Can I get even a brief opinion on what it is that you would think about that? Like, it's pretty insane. I'm blown away by the actual stupidity of NASA workers. I can't believe it.
What, that they're doing it and don't realise that it's all fake?
No, this was a panel. I mean, even if they were up there and they were like, if they were smart enough to like answer certain questions, the people on the panel, these not astronauts but NASA workers, people who should know their stuff, know the Mars mission, know things about it, they were being asked questions by the audience, very intelligent questions, answer it at all. I also seen how other technicians and people who deal with, there was an engineer or something, and he said, there's no way, he said, he said, I'm a lead engineer, he said, I know everything about what it is that we are doing on site, no matter what it is to do with whatever we're engineering. I know every aspect on the blueprint. I have to. So the main guy on the panel was asked a question and he could not answer it. He's like making a joke, and he was just one of these Elvis looking guys. Like you would say, he's definitely an actor or whatever, but he could not answer the question. It's not that he wouldn't. He admitted that he couldn't answer the question.
To the audience looking for the one person who
Yes!
is actually doing that particular job to
Yeah, he's not here today. Next question, please. I was completely blown away.
Other
I
people
thought,
just don't notice it though, do they? But we didn't notice it before. We just do now.
Does anybody besides me think that Neil deGrasse was probably a comedian before? Like, I think Neil deGrasse Tyson was a comedian before he started doing this. They just like found him in Yuck Yucks or something and gave him a job because he sounded convincing. Just not very funny. I don't know.
Yeah, he's I don't know. And years ago I used to watch him on PBS when he did his Star program there on PBS, and I was always fascinated with space and all that, and I just couldn't. When I came to the realization that it was all a lie, just all the hours upon hours I wasted studying absolute nonsense. I mean,
oh, listen, my friend, don't think that way. You did not waste time. You found hours and hours of ways to prove that something is invalid. Everything you've done is a valid thing. You validated lots of people that are working really hard now. So the things that you went and done are not a waste of time. You've done something extremely valid that everybody here in this moment can appreciate because you can see the difference. And people out there that can make speculation and do postulations and do arguments. But if you've gone out and done the work and then you turn around and you say, look, you know what? Give me your argument and I can tell you how it's wrong. That's the one everybody wants in their corner because you're doing the right thing. You're being a scientist. So it's not a waste of time. You did a great job. Everybody here, I say, was as a Trekkie or a Star Wars fan at one point. Am I wrong?
I
Dave.
was a massive Stargate, Star Trek, Star Wars. If it had Star in the title.
What do you watch? Battlestar Galactica, the old one.
Sci-fi.
Yeah, I was a fan of the old Battlestar and the old Star Trek series. Yeah, I wasn't much into the new generation, but definitely the old Star Trek.
Could I just say one thing? I know that we're carrying on talking, but Dave, I just wanted to say who was on the hangout. We've got Billy, who's in our group. We've got Dee. We've got Gary, who's just muted. We've got John, who's just taken his dog for a walk, Morgile. We've got Frankie, Series, you, Patricia, me, and Wilson on the phone.
That's cool. Nice to meet you, and thanks for the comment, Billy. I've just seen it on YouTube. What I'll do, I think I'll wait till John comes before I go into an explanation, because I'd really like him to hear, and I'd really like his feedback as well on this as well, because I know Jaron's seen the video and he's given his feedback, and I know Bob Nodal's seen it and a few others, and I'm still waiting for Bob to come back with a comment, but I know he's never seen it.
So what did Jaron say then?
It showed on the messages that he's actually viewed it. So
what did Jaron say then?
Yeah, I'll put a link in the Hangout chat as well, Dave. So hopefully, John will get to actually see your moon race video as well.
Yeah, Jaron, it just put it's put subbed, and they put, what difference do you see in the size? And he was referring to the apogee and the perigee of the moon, because as from my location here in the north, as the moon gets southern declination, because of atmospheric lensing and refraction, it would stay the relative same size, which it normally does, doesn't it? But what I've noticed is the actual piece does diminish, so it does actually get smaller as it goes further south. I think it gets smaller.
I like Jaron. Jaron's okay, but he's like the Justin Bieber of flat Earth. It's like.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I've got a full-time job. I've got a small 3-year-old son and a missus. You know, I mean, I work split shifts, so I work 2-10, 6-2 shifts, alternating. So my spare time is actually physical research, not just looking in a book or going onto YouTube or going onto Google and going onto Wikipedia, something like that. I'm actually doing the research, and if I come across a problem or an obstacle, what I'll do, I'll basically research that obstacle, that problem, and try and solve it, or try and give an explanation for it. And that's what I do throughout all my videos. Like I say, the moon race, I'll just give an overview of it. It came about because I'd had quite a few debates with Darren Nesbitt. I'm sure you all know him, and we was locked in an argument over the circling, and obviously the 4D or the square, as some refer to it. So what I did, using obviously reading a lot of books like Statistic Astronomy and things like that, I got the idea. Well, if I time the moon green, if it's on a circle and it's going further south, it should need to speed up. So I should actually see a difference as it crosses my screen, and that's how the video come about. Really, I'll go into a little bit more detail later, but it's nice to meet you all anyway, and I'll go back into it a bit more when John's here, so we can all
okay, Dave. Thanks.
Because, like I said, the feedback's initially been good. I was quite surprised. I thought I was going to get a lot of questions asked, but because I've actually put the source data on the actual link as well, it does help, because they can say, oh, well, how do you know it does that in New Zealand? Well, I put the link there. Go and click on the link and have a look for yourself. So that it's been good feedback, but I'm quite pleased with it. Like I say, I put a lot of time and effort into it, sacrificed a lot of sleep, sacrificed time with my family. So, you know what I mean? It is appreciated.
Yes, we
well, it's
appreciate
definitely appreciated here. Everybody appreciates it, for sure.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
I've been sharing your you put your subscription thing on a few places, and I shared it on my page as well. And I was going to make a video specifically giving you a shout out at some point as well on my YouTube channel as well. So,
and I use
stuff out there. We really have, Dave, because it really is. I mean, I can see the importance. I really can. So.
I know I shared it with 5 different people, my daughter and 2 other people that I know. So
I know I didn't use it all, Dave, because I
It's
was
definitely-
making my own video,
was a
but
good-
I used it in my video as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's much appreciated. I watched the video at work, actually. I don't know if it was yesterday, Karen. I think it was yesterday when I commented on it, didn't I? So,
Well,
yeah,
the number on it was really good, and I wondered, because obviously Facebook had barred me for a few days, and I went and looked on Santos's page, Santos, and Santos had been promoting it.
that's cool.
Hey guys, I'm back, by the way. Sorry to interrupt.
Hello, John, we have an extra person now. You might want to hear what this person has to say. His name is Dave Marsh, and he's been doing his own video and his own research. So, Dave, take it away.
Awesome. What's up, Dave?
How are you doing, John? We met briefly on an hangout a few weeks ago with Antonio and Mike Jack, ODD. I think you can remember. It was quite late, and I was trying to get on the hangout and eventually got on. I was only on for about 10, 15 minutes because it started going light, and my young son would have been up probably 2 hours later, but yeah.
Yeah, I do a lot of hangouts, but I do believe I remember you. Yeah, good to see you again, man.
Yeah, nice to see you, John.
So, do you want to... Well, what it is that Dave wanted to prove something. And so, go ahead, Dave. Tell him what you wanted to prove.
Well, let me start from the beginning. Obviously, I've been supporting the circling sun and moon map since I've obviously awoken to the flat Earth, the globe deception kind of thing, and just plodding along my own business, and I got into a few Darren Nesbitt. I'm sure you all know him, and there was heads basically over. Like I'm saying, yes, the sun and moon circling, and I've proved that in my video, Moon Roll Perspective, which was a good platform to show that the actual sun and moon do circle a stationary plane. So anyway, to cut a long story short, what I did, I'd been reading books like Statistic Astronomy and all books like that, and I got the idea for moon race. It was actually on Globebusters a few months back, if you can remember, John. Bob showed a little bit of it, the actual first moon race. I don't know if you can remember.
You know, and I don't think I ever got the if you don't mind, put a link to your channel, or better yet, to that video in the chat, and I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, I
think
there's
these are
already
linked
a
in the chat.
second video in the chat already.
Okay, because I'm looking at my Google Hangout screen, and I don't see anything in the chat.
It's all right. We can get it to you afterwards, so don't worry.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So basically, I got the idea to shoot the moon and to time it when it was on the tropics and on the equator. And it has been in the UK, especially in the East Midlands where I am, because the weather is absolutely shocking. You know what I mean? It's cloudy all the time. It's raining. I mean, we haven't seen no sun here for about a week. You know what I mean? We're in the middle of summer. So it is a difficult experiment to do, and I had to race. When I captured the moon on the tropics and on the equator, I didn't quite catch them on the tropics and equator. You know what I mean? There was quite a little bit off on some, and maybe a day off, because I give myself 3 days to shoot each one, like one on when it was at the furthest north or furthest south, and then 1 day either side of it. So I give myself a bit of a window to observation. So basically, when it was on the Tropic of Capricorn, I basically timed the moon as it entered my screen and as it left the other side, and then I waited like a week when the moon went south towards the equator, and I repeated it again. And when I repeated it this time, the moon speeded up. I was like, whoa, this is looking good for the circle, sun and moon, because obviously that's what it would need to do to cover the more ground. So then like about a week later, I think it was 21st of February, I set my camera up again, exact same position, exact same focal range. I did it at the full ×60 optical zoom, so I couldn't go any further, zoom any further in. It was actually at the maximum optical zoom, and I did them all at 1080, 60 frames a second, so I can up frame rate and all that. And what I noticed on the third observation, the moon actually slowed down, and I'm thinking, well, that's not right. sense. So the video I actually made, I actually said that it was inconclusive. I thought to myself, was it because I did it on moonrise on one of the observations? I did another one a couple of hours after moonrise. So when I decided to make moonrise 2, I made sure I caught them at zenith. So there was always at my south. I think the one on the Tropic of Capricorn is a little bit off south because I had to go to work, so I had to shoot it about 20 minutes before that. So basically, I repeated the experiment again, but this time the focus to about times 40. So I had a bit more score, obviously, to play with, like, you know what I mean, time-wise. And I recorded them again, and the same again. The moon down when it's on the Tropic of Capricorn. It's Cancer, sorry. It's speeding up when it gets to the equator, and then it's actually slowing down again. Capricorn. Now, one way I could actually prove my observations were the same, and that was to look at the meridian crossing on Mooncalc and time and date. Because I don't know if you've seen my post before. What I did a series of posts where I used my Dioptra app on my phone to actually shoot the moon at zenith and to compare it with time and date in Mooncalc. I did about 4 or 5 different posts on it to say, look, you know what? This app's only 2 degrees out and 2 degrees out on the altitude as well. So it's pretty accurate, you know what I mean? So I have got the data to back all this up, and I know that time and date is right. When it comes to rise and set, there's a few questions what need to be asked there, because I've seen it out here, and it said it's set on the app, and I could see it here going north, like behind me. So I also took snapshots of the meridian crossing. So that's basically on the night of the observation. On the following night, I took a snapshot of the moon in the exact same position. And what I did, so for my first observation was 25 hours and 7 minutes. That's for the moon on the following night from the 6th to get to the same spot the following night, which was 25 hours and 7 minutes. Now in February, on time and date, 24 hours 58 minutes. Yeah, I know you might say, yeah, that's quite a lot of difference, but they use a lot more better equipment than mine. But what you'll do, you'll see the pattern as we go on. And so that was 25 hours and 7 minutes when it was on the Tropic of Cancer. And then my reading, the equator, was 24 hours 46 minutes. So you can see there's a massive. This is only over a 24-hour period, so you can see then that there's been a massive increase in the actual speed.
You know what I would like to see if I had my druthers is I would like to see somebody doing the same observation during the equinox and during each solstice, right? And so do it so that like the sun or moon or whichever is 90 degrees overhead for your location. So do one at Ecuador. Do one that's on the Tropic of Capricorn, and do one observation that's on the Tropic of Cancer, and then do the same exact experiment. You'd have to have some way to get it controlled in terms of the camera height and the lens. You'd have to use obviously the same camera settings and everything, but circumstantially that is interesting. I think there's a lot of good evidence, or at least circumstantial evidence, in the sense that I can't prove it myself. But even going back to Zetetic astronomy, it appears that the southern latitudes are of a larger circumference than the northern latitudes in terms of, rings on the flat Earth. Now, the path of the sun is what's being described when we're talking about latitude, and especially latitude rings in the flat Earth. That's sort of describing the path of the sun, assuming that it's going in a circular path. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Earth itself is a disk, for one thing, but another thing is too, you've got atmospheric conditions that are going to affect your observations heavily from wherever you're at. And so since you're in the northern hemisphere, closer to the Tropic of Cancer than you are to the Tropic or to the equator rather, then there may be some atmospheric phenomenon causing that apparent speed of the moon. However, it is pretty good anecdotal evidence. I've seen videos, or rather long exposure shots, or kind of like time-lapse shots of somebody that's in the pretty far northern hemisphere, getting Polaris in the shot, like at the top right corner of the shot, and sort of facing southwest. So you're seeing the rings around Polaris, and you're nowhere near the equator. The equatorial stars are way below the horizon, but you get this effect due to the atmosphere where you start to see the stars that are further towards the southwest traveling in straight lines, and then the stars that are furthest southwest, so like the bottom left corner of the picture, are actually appearing to rotate in the opposite direction as the North Pole star. So this is like pretty good evidence that the alleged counter rotation of southern stars is really quite an optical illusion, and for a few reasons. One thing that I just learned the other day, I don't know, you guys may have already been aware. The troposphere or the troposplane, whatever you want to call it, it's claimed, and I think that this is probably accurate, but it's claimed by science that the troposphere is not uniform. So it's thickest at the equator, being about 10 miles thick at the equator, and allegedly about 4 miles thick during the winters of each. So you've got basically, if you're thinking of a flat Earth model, it would describe exactly this toroidal or sort of half toroidal vortex, this magnetic field that is generated by the Earth itself. You've got sort of a magnetic vortex in the north, if that's the center, and if that's spinning clockwise, or if I guess it's the centrifugal rotation of the magnetic Earth is clockwise, then the centripetal rotation of the magnetic Earth would necessarily be counterclockwise. And so that also could lend a lot to the apparent counter-rotation of southern stars, along with this atmospheric condition. And that's exacerbated by the whole sort of toroidal shape of not just the magnetic field, but even according to mainstream science, the troposphere represents this exact sort of half donut toroidal shape that we already know the flat Earth would have, assuming sort of an AE projection. Now, with that being said, the AE projection has flaws in it. There are known flaws in the matrix of the projection itself, but let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater here.
That's Ceres' words. They are, isn't it? Ceres says that all the time. Can I just say something, John?
Yeah.
We are researching ourselves. I just want Ceres maybe to come in now, because we are doing completely different research.
Karen, can I just finish what I was going to say, because I haven't actually finished yet.
Go on then.
I was doing the readings later.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. So my readings was 25 hours 47 on the Tropic of Cancer, 24 hours 46 on the equator, and 24 hours 52 minutes on the Tropic of Capricorn. Now, I went to time and date for the UK from the same location, and for March, the meridian crossing was 24 hours and 57 minutes. March the 13th, I went on the equator, the meridian crossing was 24 hours 45 minutes. You can see it speed up again. And then I went to March 21st, meridian crossing for the Tropic of Capricorn was 24 hours 49 minutes. Now, as you can see, there's a bit of a pattern there. My pattern, mine's following the same one. It seems to be slowing down on the tropics and speeding up on the equator. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll go to New Zealand location and I'll do it from there. So I went to the meridian crossing in New Zealand, 4 hours 58 minutes. And when it's on the equator, it's 24 hours 46 minutes, 1 minute different again. And when it's on the Tropic of Capricorn, near them, yeah, exactly same time, 24 hours 49 minutes. That's from their location. Now, you know that Paul Kofo has done loads and loads of star trails from the Southern Hemisphere. He's actually filmed them live when he's actually been doing the star trails. So that tells me that statistic astronomy, that they originally thought there was only one vortex or vortice. I believe that there is two. You know that a magnet has a positive and a negative, and I think we're actually getting two vortices, and that's why the moon, when it's on the Tropic of Capricorn, as it's making its circle bigger and bigger, what it does then, it will then, as it crosses that equator, it will pick up on the southern vortice, and then it will obviously drag it inwards, and then it will drag it outwards again. That's what I'm seeing from my observations, and that's what I've documented. What's happening above is beyond me, but that's what I'd just like to say about that. And like I say, I believe there's two vortices. You maybe believe the one, but I've filmed two, and I've seen obviously Paul Corpo's shot of his star trail, and it's actually in the video as well. So it'd be interesting to get.
Yeah, real quick, can I read a quick part of an article to you guys, because this article includes a phrase and a claim that I've never heard, and I'm just wondering if maybe you guys have heard anything about this. I found it really interesting, but the article is from www.physics.csbsju.edu/astro. So it's some sort of a college. I don't know what CSBSJU stands for, but it's a college. And I mean, I can read to you for context the whole thing, but the part that jumped out at me was they're talking about how the most of the constellations, during ancient times were found in the northern hemisphere. But just jumping to the part that jumped out at me, if I can find it. Let's see. Here it is. No, I'll just have to read it. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay, so this is talking about the constellations, who invented them. This is just 3 or 4 little sentences. Okay. Our modern constellation system, it is a quote, our modern constellation system comes to us from the ancient Greeks. The oldest description of the constellations as we now know them comes from a poem called Phenomena, written about 270 BC by the Greek poet Aratus. However, it's clear from the poem that the constellations mentioned originated long before Aratus's time. No one is sure exactly where, when, or by whom they were invented, and yet a little detective work reveals a plausible origin. The first clue is Aratus's constellations did not include any near the south celestial pole the point on the celestial sphere directly above the Earth's south pole, because that area of the sky was always below the horizon of the ancient constellation makers. From the size of this uncharted area of the sky, we can determine the people responsible for the original constellations lived near a latitude of 36 degrees north, south of Greece, north of Egypt, but similar to the latitude of the ancient Babylonians and Sumerians. Now, this is the sentence that jumped out at me. In addition, the constellation free zone is not centered exactly on the south celestial pole because of a, quote, wobble of the Earth's axis of rotation. The position of the celestial pole changes slowly with time, a phenomenon known as precession. Now, here's the first thing is, okay, if there is this so-called constellation free zone, which I've never heard that terminology used before in this physics article at some college, but they claim that there's a constellation free zone due to the wobble of the Earth. Now, I think it goes without saying that if the south celestial polar area was a constellation free zone due to the wobble, then the north celestial pole area should be exactly the equal and opposite of that. So that raises some big questions for me. But I guess the thing that you mentioned, and so just sort of chew on that for a minute and let me know if you've heard that phrase before, constellation free zone. But I had somebody mention to me, and I've heard this comment or seen this comment basically copied and pasted all over the internet, that a person is claiming that themselves and 2 friends, all of them who live in the far southern hemisphere, this guy alleges to live in Australia. The other alleges to live in the southern tip of South America, and the other alleges to live in the south, portion of Africa. And the claim that they're making is that they can all see the Southern Cross in the south at the same time. Now, this is categorically impossible because at least one or two of those locations would be at daytime. So this is an obvious lie, and it just makes you wonder why people would lie about this. And frankly, I've studied and observed, far south telescopic views of the Southern Cross, and frankly, I've never seen the same phenomenon. And I'm not talking about a North Pole star, but I'm talking about a single central point that never moves in the south. Furthermore, I think that the problem we have, and I urge you guys to watch, if you haven't seen it, one of Dr. Zach's most recent videos shows in a computer software program called Cinema 4D, which is very realistic, and you can program in the actual causes of refraction and effects of different things. And they were able to model out perfectly the apparent southern rotation of the southern stars with a central Polaris and all the other stars rotating around it when you added the atmosphere. And so definitely check that out. Now, I don't disagree that there may be a second pole, although at this point I'm still leaning towards the disk magnet sort of theory, where you've got the single central North Pole. The South Pole is the circumference of the field, and any atmospheric or any counter rotation of the southern stars are atmospheric and electromagnetic phenomenon, and not an actual phenomenon of counter rotation.
John, did you see any of the pictures that came up on the chat this then? Series has put some pictures up.
I've seen this particular video. I don't know if you see the Hangout chat room. With Hangout has two chat rooms, an outdoor and indoor. It's the one saved somewhere on the Hangout, and the indoor is just only when you're there.
Okay.
Series,
well, yeah, I got the link to the motion of stars and celestial poles.
Series, if you can't see them, why don't you just show them on the Hangout? Why don't you just share on the Hangout?
Share images.
Yeah.
Only links. But I have made a video myself. In a way, I realize it's just flat. The question is, how does it work? And reality is the one actually initiating my own research on this.
Oh, and how old is this? I may have seen this before. Yeah, I have seen this before.
Yeah, 40.
I think that, yeah, it's similar. There's see if I can find the one, Dr. Zach. Oh, shit.
My work is based on his concept.
Okay.
Ken Wheeler's electromagnetic stuff and his extrapolation of syncretism. And yeah, it's just hard to explain other than just what's the video, and then we can actually talk about what is in the video. But in a sense,
can you see my screen? Sorry.
Since in my research, I practically the circle. Both are wrong. Part of a divide and conquer system of keeping you at least in the evil, and they use to actually fool you in the lesser evil. Yeah, this is indeed the 4D sky in that sense. Yeah.
John, just like I said, that model you've got now, that's actually based on research, and I've been in conversation with him quite a lot, and the actual numbers and figures he actually used for that are actually NASA's numbers and figures what he used to build that model. So he actually sent me the spreadsheet, which has got the moon's motion.
Because the thing is,
160 years.
any meteorologist can send up a weather balloon and confirm what the density and the particulates and stuff are in the atmosphere at different elevations very easily. And so those numbers have to be accurate. But you can see that they modeled all this out. This is all to scale based on the heliocentric model. And what you get is, they're just using the assumption that all the stars are going around Polaris. But when you add in the atmosphere, you can see that it matches perfectly what we see in the southern hemisphere. And it just sort of showed it. I'll back it up again so you can see it again. But it's really, I would recommend. It's only a 10-minute video, but it is this. It's the second part in a 3-part series. So I would watch the whole thing.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So I won't play it anymore unless you want to see it again. But it's pretty awesome because they're just using, Cinema 4D is a realistic, it's a software program to create realistic renderings using even, exact refraction limits and stuff like that.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, what I have noticed, and know, John, is, obviously being in the north and we have more access to celestial sky than the equator. You know what I mean? They only get a small window of the actual celestial sky, whereas we can actually observe more celestial sky. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Inside the tropic regions.
That actually makes a lot, because again, you've got the thermosphere, which is 10 miles thick at the equator, right? And it tapers off to only about 4 or 5 miles thick at the at either pole. So that's really interesting. And what's even more interesting is the Antarctic plateau is supposedly 3,000. Hold on, what? Yeah. And okay. The Antarctic. Now I totally lost my train of thought completely. I'm sorry, guys. Never mind.
I mean, I should say before you carry on, then we're trying to gather your thoughts. The series is model is more working on a square / rectangle map.
And what I try to say is the other way around. I base on reality itself instead of working from a model and try to project reality in that. And what reality is, and from that I actually create what the model is. Having already a model, and in a sense I discovered it's not a circle and it's not a ball. It's both not one of them. And they fool us with the ball because that's the closest one.
Well, what this is doing here is not necessarily trying to prove a model or anything, but the major claim of most flat earthers is that you have a central North Pole with all of the stars going concentric rings with Polaris. And one of the biggest arguments against that is the apparent movement of the southern stars. And so when you realize that the apparent movement of the southern stars can be caused by just merely atmospheric refraction and lensing.
The thing is, I'm not basing it on the sky. I'm basing it on the photographic material Google Maps actually shows you right in your face.
I think David sounds
is
just like
pure square. Photo between east and west, north and south.
Okay, so are you? So we're
photographic material. What is projected in right in your face through the normal website app, but in Google Maps itself, they have actually built it in such a way that when you actually look into the detail, you see the square image. But as soon as you're zooming out far enough to not recognize the detail anymore, they go over into the ball projection. What I actually did was get the smallest possible images, glue them together as a complete square at the location. From this data, actually the projection into the latitude adjustment of the ball flat map, and then the longitude adjustment for the projection on the ball itself, and see what happens to the image. And doing that, data itself translated into anything without destroying the actual empirical detail of the location you know is true. It actually shows how flat and how square it is. The sky just connects into this way easier as well, because the square itself goes back to latitude 85 and minus 85. So you missed the 5 degree, but to translate the GPS coordinates into the XY coordinates in where the images are actually stored, and translating the last 5 degrees, I actually end up with an extra square on top and then an extra square on the bottom. A way to actually fill that in was with the elevation data, because that was the only data what was actually GPS coordinates to get a location somewhere on the map, and from there the height itself. And but every pixel based in XY coordinates to fill up the gap in what to see. The graphics sense, because they don't material there. With actually filling it up with the elevation data. And that elevation data itself shows that when you translate it into the ball and you translate it back into the triple square it came from, you lose a lot of the data. And you can't end up with the same data I have from the elevation data and the photographic data. And when you actually transform the photographic data into the ball projection itself, you can actually see how the corners of houses are no longer 90 degrees anymore, and the other one is wider, the other one is shorter. And it doesn't matter what you do with the photographic data, with it you actually destroy the reality itself. And that's where I actually concluded that is the true format, the UTM format. As free energy explains that the military uses even the UTM format based on that they need to actually know the distances, because they have to do their logistics and administrative work for that. And the photographic version Google Maps shows us is the actual UTM format. And that explains to me that that is just truth right in your face. And we are completely distracted with models, realizing what the truth of the data itself shows.
Yeah, I don't think we need a model either. I think step one is getting the truth out that the Earth doesn't have any curvature and it's stationary. But when you say like linear or square map, now are we talking? And I don't mean this like in an offensive or derogatory way, but do you mean like the Pac-Man map?
In a sense, but I'm more into what Tesla explains in how it is a realm. Everything is its own center of it. And while the east-west loop is proven in the sense that we can end up in the same place, is
Wilson's
not
got to
like
go.
a Pac-Man. There is an edge in the square itself. You just take the edge with you because you are the center of the whole circle.
I'll have to. I've never heard that quote. I mean, I've definitely heard him refer to the Earth as a realm, but I don't remember all that. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't say it, but I'll have to look more into that.
Yeah, it goes a lot deeper because basically it's out of the flesh and into the actual spirit of who you actually are. It's not like they're trying to hide God, but they're actually trying to hide you. You who you are. Done from birth on, actually. They've misled everybody to actually sustain the lie in that sense, in the fiction, instead of actually realizing who we are. And there is the biggest dilemma in people actually getting to know the complete and utter confrontation with the complete and utter responsibility of what you actually already have. The only thing you're doing is fooling yourself and giving away to others because you think others have it. The whole essence behind it, that you're confronted with a utopian of how anarchy actually is, and that is taking full responsibility for yourself, not else as an authority, in other words, as an author of your life. You be your own author, the particular image of I am in to be, and not an identity, but the actual action of being.
I definitely agree, and I've got some close friends who adhere to like a linear or Pac-Man sort of map, and I've looked at both. I've looked at concave Earth. I've looked at the sort of Robotham zetetic theory, and out of all of them, I got to say, I mean, it really seems like they're central north. I mean, if you're anywhere on the compasses, is always our compasses, even if you're in the far south. If you're in the United States, you see Polaris, whereas if you're in Russia and face north, you also see Polaris. A circumnavigation, which perfect sense on a sort of a round map, whereas it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in a sort of linear Pac-Man map. And so I'm not saying possible, but what I'm saying is I conclusions on.
In the sense that it is in east-west finite distance of the south, I worked out through the flower of life pattern that there even should be more than already in the data itself, an extra square. And I figured through.
If I could just finish what I was, real quick, if I could just finish what I was saying, I do based on my own research and logic. It's my conclusions on narratives that pushed on me. So that's not where I'm. I don't, but I lean towards a circular model, and I think there are things wrong with the AE projection. For one example, I think degree north of the point, but Ratty lives, and furthermore, we know the problem projection where everything gets skewed basically to infinity, the Antarctic Circle. So there's definitely that projection, but I think the biggest deception involved with the AE, real quick, the biggest deception involved with the AE that presented was it being a model. It is not a model, it is a projection. It's no more a model than the Mercator projection is a model. So that's just where I'm coming from. And, ignorant things, I don't claim to know what it is, but I just lean more logical evidence that points towards a central north and the south being the circumference of that field, or wherever that field ends.
Thinking out of the box of where they put us in. I mean, not a circle, not a box.
square and the circle though. Right in our face is the square and the compass. In that heaven is both the circle and the square is the earth. And there's so many things tying into this. What is actually right in our face, and that's where they hide the truth the most.
Jon, we haven't come out with our work yet because series hasn't finished yet. So our group that we're in is invite only at the moment because we want people who are interested in what we're doing. We're taking compass readings. We've got a group of people taking compass readings from around the world, which are not included in series' work yet, which we're storing. I enter most of the readings. So this group is doing a myriad of things. And what series is found, hardly anybody's found. It's taken every day since October last year or November last year. He's had his computer on nearly 24/7 downloading all this information.
Yeah, so far, Jon, I'm seeing it that it's starting to make a lot of sense, and I'm definitely going to research more into it. No question about it.
Series has found the 4 pillars.
What's that? Magnetic declination.
And the 4D toroidal map.
Right.
I'm definitely going to look into it. You'd be foolish not to.
Have you heard of the World Beyond the Bubbles?
Yes. I sort of read through it. Now, is that the one that's sort of more? It's like sort of more like theologically. It's got more theological arguments.
With the sky as well, it ties into how the sky works, fitting within the square model I'm working with, or the square data I'm working with. It's for me, it's no longer actually a model. A part of what we are capable of being aware of in physical sense of what is there, but beyond there, it's so into the whole spiritual levels of higher dimensions in that sense. Because fourth in the sense of that east-west is the looping cycle of space, and then north-south has the same characteristics, but is 26 times bigger. Other side of the half of the circle is where heaven is in that sense. How it is explained through the map of the world beyond the poles, for example. In the circle, but it is still a square, straight line, in a sense, a circle. An infinite circle.
Just to explain, Jon, that when Ceres was looking at his information, none of the pictures bent. None of them. They just bend it to make the ball. Every picture he's downloaded fitted square.
All without destroying the actual reality of the photograph itself. To see the circle map, the EA map, can only be created through map what is the latitude longitude one-on-one. On the actual triple square I've collected from Google Maps.
Awesome.
Where you use a particular GPS formula for to actually push it into the double square projection, that first projection, already the latitude.
Well,
projected into the circle in where, or the ball, in where they also destroy the longitude. In 2 steps, they destroy it in both ways. And that's a projection of how to actually work with it in an essence. Because it's just not conventional sense projectable that you have a model to have an easy point to work with, other than that you have your 0 point in latitude longitude. And from there you have the actual size of how the equator size is in 24,900 miles. What I figured was to actually calculate distances myself between latitude longitude positions is to actually translate those into the XY coordinate system. On the XY units, the actual distance and translate that into the miles or in the kilometer size of the ether. That's how I calculate any position on the square, which latitude and longitude I have, because I translate that into the XY coordinates. I can actually calculate distances. And that says to me that the XY coordinates, the photographic of the XY coordinates, is the actual dimension. Things are measured.
Right. Well, I would just say a couple things. First off, I don't claim to know or I don't represent any model, although I will, again say that I lean towards a, sort of a standard flat Earth model, just based on the evidence that is available to us at the time. Now, for one thing, even let's just suppose the ISS can go 250 miles up. The flat Earth is so large that even at 250 miles up, you're only going to get a very small field of view. You can only see a little bit of the Earth at one time. So it's very difficult to say what everything actually looks like. Our maps were all designed by pretty much ancient people. The first globe and Mercator projections didn't come out till about 1500. They were at the same time came out. And so, it's really difficult to say what everything is. Now, in terms of when you're dealing with fourth or even fifth dimension, if you consider fourth dimension as time and fifth dimension is something else, we are physically not capable of understanding, describing, comprehending, or relaying anything that is in a higher dimensional than us, because we can consider such things, but frankly it's beyond our capacity to understand. And so when you get into theoretical things like higher dimensions, it's possible, it's a possibility, but it's something that will never be demonstrated or proven. Or so I guess what I'm saying is
from the scientific community, forget that, there to actually prevent us from realizing what reality is. The whole top-down control structure is there to control us.
Well, I think that we may be able to higher dimensions from in a spiritual sense, but I don't think that it's in through like observations and experiment. We may be able to get knowledge of higher dimensions if such things exist through meditation and through like in a spiritual sense. But other than that, our left brain
and flower of life thing, what is the actual sacred knowledge? We just don't understand. We just don't connect this, and actually, it's my birth sign of the Mayan calendar, the Skywalker, in where my job is to connect the missing parts of the pillars of heaven, between heaven and earth. Actually, practically what I'm doing here in connecting the physical sense with the spiritual sense. The sky itself is the actual energies, as in astrological sense, in how things are kind of orchestrated from above, influencing energies, and we are just reading that in our horoscopes and how detailed that etc. is, and you can actually recognize yourself within that particular concept, especially this mind kind of stuff in where they even put in more of this. It all boils down that you actually realize whole energy levels of spirituality in all the chakra systems, in how you are spiritually actually growing into an awareness. And it is all between the child and the master in that sense, in that the child has that there is no difference between the two, other than that just one doesn't know and the other is fully aware of it. And the only way to become aware of that, the letter of the mind, in that sense, in 3 steps of the ego and the universal step, where you actually, as you say, as a child, you do what your parents say, you do what your teachers should teach, you do what your boss asks from you, and you do what society expects from you. But then you have the ego, and that is the know from within against the outside force, yes, from the collective level. And the subtle way to keep it there is to stroke it, and that's the people who are getting smarter, who are getting paid, who are getting their house, who are getting everything in life, to become addicted to, in the sense of addicted to the flesh, in that sense. Level is the yes from within, and the yes from within is the question: what is the one yes left? What is never forced out, forced from? I figured that's the only one actual yes to the responsibility of your own freedom. Is that they will never force it from you. They will always tell you that they are the authority of your life. Everybody can tell about how you have to live your life, but never they will tell you actually you have to live your own life. You are the one actually completely, full and utterly responsible for any decision you do in your life. Take that responsibility. You are in that freedom. Only be free.
I totally agree. Something that you mentioned about like connecting. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but I just recently stumbled onto the Gospel of Thomas, which is a relatively new. It was 1945, and I just realized the thing existed. I'd never heard of the Gospel of Thomas, and one of my favorite, because it's all just parables. There's no narrative or anything to it, but one of my favorite things that he says, Jesus, these are just for coming from Jesus. He says, "If those who lead you say unto you, behold, the kingdom of heaven is in heaven, then the birds of heaven do. If they say unto you, it is in the sea, then the fish will be before you. But the kingdom is within you, and it is outside of you. When you know yourselves, then shall you be known, and you shall know that you are the sons of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you are in poverty, and you are that poverty."
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I don't know what your guys' feelings are on the
Can I say one thing? We also know someone else who has picked up on all the scalar waves and has picked up on the firmament, and also he's got equipment he can use where he's picked up the heartbeat of Earth. He's picked up God's heartbeat. I've heard it. It's a frequency, but
that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of the heartbeat. Now the firmament, I'm not so sure in terms of like a glass dome. I mean,
it's a
I definitely
frequency.
think that there is.
It's at least a frequency.
Square dimensions stuff is 24,901 miles. Then we are probably in the middle of the cube in where we are halfway at, so it will go up about 12,500 miles.
It's water above and it's land below. Antarctica's land, and above Russia it's water. With land underneath the sea.
In that sense, already looping into itself as the fourth dimension, and as well looping into itself, but through the whole fifth dimensional circle, we get also the sixth dimensional influence from heaven, from the whole up to the heavens.
What happened was...
What is also as the sky turning over from east to west.
What happened was... Ceres told me... Ceres told me we lived in the the heart garden of the tree of life, And then the next day I met the man who heard who'd captured the heartbeat. So we're living in the heart garden of the Tree of Life. And I said the next day I met the man through D, who's heard the heartbeat, and I heard it myself. So we're living in God anyway.
Interesting. That's interesting, and yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me from an experience that I've had. But that I could never try to explain it. But in terms of the waters above and waters below, the way that I've seen that, I've actually sort of really thought about that over the last couple of years. The way that I see it is first of all, the Bible was never intended to prove a flat Earth or prove a globe Earth. Now, of course, it aligns with the flat Earth because everybody knew the Earth was flat when the books were written. But in terms of the waters above and the waters below, I mean, to me, that just seems to make perfect sense because we obviously have dry land, and then you have like sea level or the water, which is the level below. And then everybody knows once in a while it rains, so it's safe to assume that there's water above us. And to me, it just seems like a natural explanation for rain. And in fact, it's technically correct because, the air, the troposphere is filled with water vapor. So it's almost as if, what I would call, or what a scientific person would call the magnetic field causing different density layers to tend on the Earth. Maybe a spiritual or a Christian person would say it's God doing it. And I think both are correct because obviously God created everything, and he doesn't have to use terminology like electromagnetism. We do to describe things that we really don't understand. Electrical can manipulate electrical circuits, but honestly, they have no clue what's going on inside them. There's a theory that it's a instant transfer of electrons, but that's a theory. That there's really no knowledge of what indeed is going on in an electric circuit.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand it myself in a way that pre-energy devices themselves. As far as I figure, so I get a suspicion of that. It doesn't matter where, on what medium it is, the frequency itself is the energy. And in the sense that the word of the Most High in that essence is also the energy behind all the movements of everything on every level, earth, water, air, fire, and ether.
Yeah, it all exists just according to His will. I firmly believe that. In Genesis, the account of everything being spoken into existence makes a lot of sense because we're learning more and more that everything is some form of vibration or some spectrum of the electromagnetic field. Some sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So visible light is a sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. Audible sound is the sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. I would say, radiation, anything, all sorts of waves are just different magnitudes of the same thing. And it's all due to this supernatural creator that wills it. I mean, that's what I've concluded, and I just truly believe that we are not intended or meant to understand it. We're meant to marvel at it, and I think that the proof of God, the Creator, is just self-evident and all around us. And with that in mind, we should be humble and thankful for just simply having a place to enjoy. As bad as things can get, I mean, we still have this awesome experience that is the mystery of life. So,
It
I
is
think we were
it
meant
is
to
a mystery.
understand it, and this is
Carry on, Billy.
no. I think that we were meant to understand it, and to be connected to our Creator, and to understand the things that He has done with the creation. However, the occult knowledge, there's no, looks like they know. This is why they've kept it hidden, and this is why they falsely mislead us with false information, false history, and everything. Like Siri was saying, not to hide God, but to hide our relationship, to hide us from God, not separated from the Creator.
Yeah. Well, and of course, to falsify the entire Judeo-Christian Bible starting on page 1, I grew up thinking that the Bible was stupid because I was indoctrinated into science very young. I was into science when I was like 4,
Have you
all
read
the way up through my life.
2:9?
What's that?
Revelation 2:9.
What I'm saying is that was then and this is now, of course, because once you realize that scientism is a load of crap, then it's made me revisit the Bible, which I know well, but of course it's taken in a completely different context when you realize that it's technically correct about certain things that are poo-pooed by science. So just being frankly honest, that it's difficult to believe in the Bible if you believe you live on a spinning sphere. The two theologies are mutually exclusive, and you have to pick one over the other. And frankly, we are indoctrinated with space stuff, and the Christians and Christianity are frankly, basically the redheaded stepchild of any
whole
comedian
biblical part, in the sense that the religion actually tells you only the lies.
Right, of course.
What is in the scripture itself tells a whole other story.
Yes.
I never was growing up with the church or anything until I was 24, 25 by the Bible from cover to cover. Have read it and finished it. The only thing I had to even read it this themselves.
Right. No, and a lot of it's funny, but a lot I've heard from several former Catholic priests that 90% of Catholic priests have never read the Bible once.
Whoa. Anyway, you know what they did with
Really?
what they've done? They've taken God away because the governments want to be God. And that's why they've lied to us and created a ball and lied to us with fake space and pretending to go to the moon and all that. It was to take God away. So that people don't go to church or don't believe in God and those things. So the government's become the God.
To mention something, going back to what we was talking about the single voters or whether there's two voters. Interestingly, in the north, when the moon's closest to it or when the sun is, we'll actually greet the moon will actually greet us. No, I've caught it at about 56 degrees east north east. Now that's obviously way further north, and we are above the Tropic of Cancer. I know what you're going to say it's probably refraction or atmospheric lensing, which obviously would account for that. But as you get further north, the comes less because it's more perpendicular with point. But interestingly, if you go to New Zealand, if you've seen some of these videos, I've mentioned this a few times. Observers in New Zealand, and they're seeing the sun and moon greet them, which is coming from the east southeast, the west. Now you can say that's due to refraction too, but again. Southern Australia and New Zealand are both below the Tropic of. And Chippy made, what he did, trying to get the sun and moon to work on the Gleason's map, and actually get the sun and moon to work in the south was by inverting the Gleason map. I don't know if you've seen the video.
Yeah, I saw that one.
And that's the only way he could get that to work, by actually inverting the Gleason map. So that's another reason why I seem to more towards there being two votes. I know, like I said, that there is a possibility it could be refraction and atmospheric lensing. You know what I mean? I'm not going to deny that, and I'm not going to say I'm a big supporter of the 4D model, because I was originally a very big supporter of the AE model. Like I say, I still obviously
AE projection.
You should just say sorry. But but like I say, research what I've done, actually physical research where I've been out, the wet, the heat and what have you, and I've timed the moon, and even with the readings, if you look in New Zealand, where it's actually doing the same thing, I just can't come to another conclusion other than that the moon or the sun cannot be doing what it's supposed to be doing on the AE map or a projection, as you say. And that's where I'm at now. And if you've got time in a bit, John, if that's all right with Karen, I just wanted to show you a section of my video where I actually recorded the observations, and then I've done some star trails with the moon captured in the sequence, so you can actually see it actually moving around the actual vortice and actually doing a straight line. I know what you'll probably refer to back at that, but if you do get time, I won't mind showing you that section of that, because I think it's an interesting section. And in Paul Cofo's star trail from the south, it put ahead. And like I say, something just went click with me, and I thought, you know what I mean? You can't hide the meridian anywhere on the plane. You know what I mean? If you've got a meridian passing, it's gonna pass at that point, or south, or whether it's north. You know what I mean? And just taking the time of that clearly indicates that you should do.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I've got another maybe half hour or hour, so yeah, whatever you guys want to do, it's all cool.
If Dave wants to bring that up, that's perfect. Can I just say a couple of things? The UK is now having a Flat Earth convention. Gary, who's sitting quietly there, is organising it. Just wanted to let you know that there's going to be one in the UK. We've got quite a few speakers, including Mark Sargent's going to come over. I'm also organising a hangout in a few weeks' time between Santos, Mark Sargent, Darren Nesbitt, Oliver Ludlow and Dave Murphy, which is allegedly Dave. So I thought that was really good that we're going to do that as well. And another thing, can we add you to the group then? John?
In terms of for the hangout?
Well, we have a group on Facebook. Can we add you to our group? But yeah, come on more hangouts if you want. That's perfect.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just send me, you know, I don't know, an invite or whatever, or
I will do that.
Do I have to go find it? I don't know how that works.
We have to become friends first because we're in private at the moment.
I think we're friends already, John. So I can probably add you to the group.
We're only there because we don't want any trolls.
I think you're already in my group as well. I run the group Flatline, so.
We don't want any trolls in because we're really researching. Even these hangouts, you know, all these people that are on here now come on regularly, and we're talking to each other. And so, with what Series is doing, because he's doing stuff that nobody else has done before, we just don't want to be trolled right now. We don't want our work ruined. So I have my own YouTube channel. I haven't put anything up there yet because Series hasn't finished. We'll finish.
So, yeah, understood.
John, I forgot to tell you that I'm actually going to the International Flat Earth Convention, so I'll probably meet you there in November. So
Awesome.
it's all booked, the hotel's booked, and I'm just going to pay the flight. Everything's sorted, so that's a go.
Awesome, man. Yeah, luckily it's only about, I think, maybe 2 or so hours away, 2 or 3 hours away. I'm not sure. So for me, that's not that bad. I've never actually left the United States, so and I certainly don't, you know, have money stacked up to go overseas. But you know, if I hit the lottery one day, I'd love to, you know, come over the pond and visit, you know, London and everything. I've always wanted to go to Europe because
Gary,
you know, a lot of my lady from Europe.
Gary, are you there? Gary?
Yeah, I'm here.
Gary, well,
Yeah, I'm here.
did you hear that Morgile, I'm sorry, John would like to come over?
Well, he was going to say that kind of John.
Sorry, Gary,
Hey, how's it
take
going?
your earphones out and talk into the phone, Gary. Take your earphones out and just talk into the phone because it's wobbling in and out.
Me?
Yeah, Gary.
It is. I'm not very good. So I'll just turn the volume. Yeah, can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
go for
that's
it.
fine.
So basically, obviously, it's all a little bit up in the air with obviously everything. It's about to launch the website. Would be you would consider?
Sorry,
So,
one more time. Somebody just came to my office and asked me why their cell phone wasn't plugged in. Question?
What I'm basically saying is, if it can work out time, you've got the finances that we can do it. Would you consider coming over to speak at the?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, again, if I won the lottery or if it was finances paid so that I could get there, I would do it for sure. Yeah.
I think he just said that.
What we're doing is, I think I've had to allocate money to get Mark over and also other speakers from Europe. I'm not 100% certain if some of the speakers in Europe will be coming because I've got to talk to them. But if they don't, then that means I will probably have funds that I can reallocate.
If it's a possibility, let me know, and we can plan on it ahead of time. So yeah, we can definitely consider that if it's an option. So it's totally up to you, and I don't necessarily have to drag the old ball and chain out there. So I don't.
We heard that.
I would want to make you have to pay for a trip for two.
Okay, one thing I need to do, John, is I will know more. I am actually connected to you on Facebook already, so I can liaise with you. But I will. I have to. At this moment, I have to reserve judgment. I'm afraid, only because I'm working on quite a tight budget. But if I know that things are freed up in the next couple of weeks, which I will know, and also we think that the tickets are going to sell quite well. But when I know where we are, then I would love to actually talk to you again because we've already got 11 speakers in the UK and stroke Mark. One is in Spain, one's Mark Sargent, and they've got 9 in the UK. Dave Marsh being one of them. So if we can do it, it'd be great. It'd be lovely to have you over.
Yeah, just let me know ahead of time, and we'll make a plan of it.
But it's April the 21st and 22nd.
Can I just say, John, that this was only thought about a few weeks ago, and Gary has arranged all this stuff in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's taken about 3 weeks from conception, I think.
A lot of animal.
The website is starting to be built from tomorrow. So, before I hang up, I do have to go to bed soon because I've had a really long couple of days. But can I just ask you, John, have you ever heard of I'm going to say something to you now that I think is probably going to be something that a lot of people have never heard. But have you ever heard of the double barrier theory for the dome?
Double barrier.
Yeah, one being a physical barrier and the other one being a electromagnetic barrier above it.
It would make some sense to me, that because we know that the Earth has at least one, North Polar magnetic field, and it really does appear, based on all the evidence as I see it, and I could be wrong, that the shape of this magnetic field is like a donut cut in half lengthwise, placed over the top of the Earth. And again, there is modern science, and this is repeatable, demonstrable science. Shows the sphere is thicker at the equator and thinner towards the poles, 10 miles at the equator and 4 miles at the poles. And so this would be in line with this magnetic field, toroidal in shape. With that being said, it makes a lot of sense to me that we see in terms of celestial objects, light is merely a spectrum of the electromagnetic overall spectrum. Visible light and radiation are just a small sliver of that spectrum. However, light and all forms of electromagnetic waves are heavily affected by magnetic fields. And if you do have this one field sort of situation, what was the question?
No, I was just saying, have you ever heard of the double barrier?
Okay, right. So to finish my answer, sorry to interrupt, but to finish my answer, there is good evidence that at about 300 miles up, there are these ionized tubes of plasma, so negatively or electrically charged gases that form tubes, which run meridianally in the lower magnetosphere, that sort of act as, plasma is not exactly physical. It's the fourth form of matter, right? So we're talking about ionized gases. Although I could definitely see that acting as a sufficient static electric barrier to create the pressurized system that we need to have on Earth without there being any sort of physical barrier. Now, in terms of proof for any sort of physical barrier, I've never seen it, but I would imagine that if there is anything physical, it would be like frozen hydrogen and helium adherence to this, this ionized plasma somehow.
Yeah, I figured at least 12,000 high, then 400. What is it? 20,000 kilometers high, then 400 kilometers. Just that part, all the planets and etc. are there as well.
I think it's about 600 kilometers in terms of the lower magnetosphere of these tubes. But honestly, anything above 300 miles, I believe, is total conjecture. Weather balloons, the admitted world record to weather balloons is about 175,000 feet, which is like 31 miles, if I'm not mistaken. But other than that, I think everything that we see from rockets never gets up much more than, maybe 90 miles or 100 miles. They claim that the ISS is 250 miles up, but that I just don't believe that claim at all. I don't believe the ISS is up there. The fact that the ISS is visible with the naked eye from the ground proves that it is not a football field-sized object 250 miles away, simply because the angular size of that object would be too small for the eye to discern. But, anything above 300 miles, even NASA claims they can't go higher than 300 miles. So anything above that is theoretical and unobtainable.
Yeah.
Ability to get there, who knows what's beyond that, but we're never going to find out.
I think that's why Ceres stuck with the land. The stars and all that are always going to be much more harder to prove, aren't they?
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
I've witnessed some amazing things here. So I've witnessed the moon dragging the stars twice in January on the equinoxes. The moon pulled the stars around. I think that's what changes the seasons with the stars, is the moon. And then the Big Dipper for me goes around and it bends around corners. It does not go in a circle. It's very mechanical, very, as if there's...
Where do you live again? I'm sorry.
I'm the UK, but I live in the middle of the UK, but more towards the bottom part. And I just wish everybody could come here and watch how I see the Big Dipper go round.
Well, it's interesting because I was going to ask you something that just occurred to me. I've heard it claimed before that the UK on average is higher north than similar temperate zones in the United States, and they claim that is due to the Gulf Stream, which is underwater warm currents coming from the east of the United States, flowing across the Atlantic over and bringing like warm air and warm weather over towards the UK and Europe. You're with that claim?
Yeah, I mean, I live in Plymouth myself, so I'm quite Gulf Stream kind of hits when it first comes in. we get very different weather to the rest of the country. I've noticed, like, we kind of have a bubble around us of this. It's almost like we never get summer and we never get winter. We're always stuck in either spring or autumn. It's a bit weird, but
yeah, Dee lives about 80 miles from me, or 90, well, but maybe 100. So we'll say 100 to the west of me. Well, what is supposed to be west? We don't know what they all are now, do we? I mean, at the moment, the sun's coming up for me at about 3:45 in the morning. Well, sorry, the light is coming at 3. Wow. The light comes at 3:45. But in the winter, we only get a few hours of light. We only get about 6 or 7 hours of light. And in the summer, we get, like, the light has gone, except it's just in a portion of the sky. You know, it's still going. We get it for maybe 18, 19 hours. And I've been to Denmark and seen the sun never set. The sun went round the edge of the sky the whole night in Denmark when I went last year and the year before.
Really interesting. Wow.
Because I know a lot of countries, but I was talking to someone. Who was I talking to? I was talking to Blaine, who lives... Oh my goodness, where does he live, Ceres? He seemed to get quite a lot of light. But a lot of the countries, from the summer to the winter, their light doesn't change that much. Maybe a couple of hours. Australia, Hawaii. You know, it's 5 o'clock in the winter, it's 7, 8 o'clock in the summer. But we go for a drastic change. And Scotland, which is, well, supposedly above me, is lighter in the summer for longer.
Experience.
I was going to say, if you remember the other night when we was on a hangout, I was sat outside and it was still light here, and where Karen is, it was, and she's not that far away. It should have made that much of a difference.
Yeah, we're not that far away from each other. There's a lot of changes over the UK, like... You know, America maybe sees the Big Dipper and it's stretched out and it's big across the sky. We have a lot going on here. Do you agree with me, Dave?
Yes, we do. Like I say, it's where we are in the north. I think when I measured the angle to my point, I think it's at 60 degrees from my location. Same in an map up at Polaris, and actually just taking a quick snapshot. I think it's at 60 degrees, whereas my mate in Alaska, he gets it at 81 angle. So you can see the difference as you know what I mean, as you get further and further north.
But I struggle.
Got a shot of Polaris yet with diopter, so I might give that a try on the next clear night, and yeah, I'll send you the results there, Dave. Okay.
Yeah, a degree off.
I struggle with that moon, though. I struggle. I went to work one day and the moon was there, and an hour and a half later I came out, the moon was gone. I had to drive 7 miles before I could see it again. If I had to drive 7 miles to see it, how could someone in London see it? These are these perspective bubbles that Ceres is talking about.
Anyway, just wanted to share a
yeah.
page with
Do you want to do your videos as well, Dave? Do you want to do your video?
Yeah. I just want to, I'm not going to get out of the packet because it's priceless, but this is a copy of Zetetic Astronomy. Yeah, there's not many of these around, but I've actually got the PDF there, and I just wanted to read a small section of it and screen it about a paragraph long. Share the screen.
I'm just going to nick a line from Indiana Jones. That should be in a museum.
Yeah, I've got the original 1959 must be on the poles as well, still in the packet and all, and a very, very rare copy of Zetetic Cosmogony. I'll tell you how much it costs because it cost a fortune. But, so but you can't. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, you've got to put the hangout down though. You've got to put the hangout down.
What, minimise it?
No, just minimise the hangout so we can see the screen below. That's it.
So just want to read this paragraph from Static Astronomy where it says, when a current flows through a straight wire, which is A and B, a magnetic field is produced around it. The character of this field shows in the figure over the case when the current is flowing upwards through a vertical wire. When the current is flowing downwards, the field is of exactly the same character, except that the lines of force run in the opposite direction round the wire. Now, this is what I research on this small section on electromagnetism and the ether. But what I'll do now, I'll show you the video, John, with the small section what I'm about, and you'll probably get a better idea what I'm on about. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
So as you can see, I took a snapshot of the moon, the azimuth and the altitude, and then I compared it with a couple of degrees out, and then I took a diopter reading as well just to confirm my readings, and then I did one on stellarium as well. So I've got quite a lot of data there what actually matches up with my readings when it starts going a bit south. I caught a full moon on the equator, 182 degrees. As you can see, the readings, you probably won't be able to see them. You'll have to watch the video and pause it, but the readings all match up with what I'm actually. And same again on the Tropic of Capricorn. Same readings, exact same position. Just that image of the moon is slightly smaller, because that's what I'm saying, where you get the perigee and apogee, like, you know what I mean? You actually do see a reduction in the actual size as it goes further south.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And obviously, I recorded the moon at 1080 to 60 frames a second, and obviously I put them all side by side. And I obviously, just to speed the video up, I put them all at ×4. What a mistake I made on the old video is when I started the Tropic of Capricorn one, I started it at the same time as these ones. This time, I started it when it needed to be started. As you can see now, it's starting where it should be started. Before, it started actually at the beginning. So I've actually learned a little bit about capturing the moon. It's not easy to capture the moon to go in a straight line across your screen. You've got your camera at some really weird angles and all sorts, you know what I mean? You think it's going straight, then it's going off screen to one side. So it is quite a difficult task. And as you can see, if you look at the Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, they were shot at the exact same position on the exact same zoom. But can you see the reduction in size?
Yeah, it's smaller.
Smaller in the Tropic of Capricorn. It's actually reducing as it gets further away, which is interesting, because I would have thought going through more layers of atmosphere, you would actually keep it at a relative same size, but clearly that's not the case. Yeah, it's even though you see it through more layers of atmosphere, yeah, and you'd expect more lensing. It's not. That's not the case. You would get some, obviously, otherwise it'd be a tiny dot, wouldn't you? So forward that on.
Yeah, the actual itself is up more.
As you can see the times there. Just let the other time come up. So there's 5 minutes 44 to get from one point on my screen to the next on the equator, and it was 6:05. And you see how it's quite a big time on 6 minutes 17, which is like another 12 seconds. And that's because I think
Circle is bigger inside.
exactly because it's diminished slightly the radius. I'm actually seeing it's got more travel on my screen, and that's why because normally it's a fraction under that on the actual meridian timing, if you understand what I'm saying. So that's why I think I've got 6:17 there, because of the actual stage of the moon reduced, so it actually gives me more scope for traveling across my screen. So that's why I think it's a little bit exaggerated there on that, because it's not actually in real life. It's actually slightly quicker than the Tropic of Cancer.
When it's at the Tropic of Cancer, it appears to be smaller, right?
Yeah.
Now, that may be, although you're right that
Capricorn,
it would be
wasn't it? It was Capricorn. It was
through
smaller,
more
wasn't it?
atmosphere.
Yeah,
So
Capricorn.
wait a minute.
It was Capricorn. It
Smaller,
was.
Smaller on Capricorn as it goes further south.
Oh, and so, okay, right. So it's when it's in the south, it was smaller. Okay, so now it would have been 5,000 miles further laterally from when it was over Cancer. So that may, that certainly, might make it seem smaller in angular size, just a hair. We don't know what the size of the moon is, and there's definitely lensing effects. But I think that 5,000 kilometer, lateral distance increase may cause that, right?
That's what I believe. Because, like I say, I did expect it to actually either stay relatively the same size or actually get a little bit bigger. Because if you think about it, you're looking through more layers of atmosphere, and you would expect more lensing, but it's not the case. Obviously, you are getting it. Otherwise, it would be a little dot on your screen, wouldn't it? If you think about it, if you're further away.
Yeah, because it's getting 5,000 kilometers further away, and
Exactly.
yet it's just barely getting smaller. So yeah, indeed, it appears as if that there is increased lensing, yet it's sort of negated by the decrease.
Also, what you'll notice is, as it does get further south, the image deteriorates as well. So you actually lose the quality of image as well. You can't really get an image like you can when you get on the Tropic of Cancer at zenith. You know what I mean? You can get a really, really sharp image. And
yeah, that makes sense.
Sight as well. In fact, I'll just go back and I'll just version of what I'm on about. If you look at the image, I don't know if you can just see it there, but if you see how blurry it is, look, even though it was focused on Tropic of Capricorn, you couldn't get a sharp image on it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Interesting as well.
So
yeah, that's from the same location, the same cameras.
Location, same spot, same section, same 1080, 60 frames a second as well. You know what I mean? Because if I change the frame rate, it would. This is an interesting shot.
Just what I would recommend, just to prevent arguments, just as a suggestion, if you were to do this experiment or observation again, I would include in that frame some sort of frame of reference, so that you can match up, whether it's like a permanent object like a post or anything really that's permanent, so that when you match the two images up, you can show that it is the 2 scale.
Yeah, I actually was going to do that, John. I was going to over superimpose images like on the thingy, but it's like time and for me to do this, it's nearly a miracle, because I'm sacrificing like a full night's sleep on a Saturday night to try and put videos together. Like I say, I've got no experience in making videos before Flat Earth. This is, you know what I mean? I'm just learning as I go on, kind of thing. But interestingly, this image here, I got off a friend, and I've got a couple of more of these. Is the actual bright spot is the moon, and what it does, it actually projects an image on the actual glare, which is quite an interesting picture. That's a real image. That I've got a couple of them actually. So this is where I got the. I suppose it is a bit of a theory where the moon is like projected through the atmosphere. Do you know what I mean? Because when you see it in the sky, in the blue sky, you can see the blue sky through it. And I'm thinking, right, is that moon really there, or is it projected to there due to the atmosphere? You know what I mean? And this.
Well, I think that's a misunderstanding, honestly. And I've seen a lot of videos, and especially I know Eric Dubé has made a lot of claims that the moon is in the atmosphere because, you can see the blue sky like in the half moon. But the problem with that is that the sky becomes opaque and blue in between your eye and the moon. And frankly, the moonlight is high gain enough to where it's penetrating that atmosphere or creating enough interference wave patterns that it penetrates through that opaque blue and reaches your eye. Whereas the darkened portion of the moon, you're just simply going to see the blue scatter and refraction of the sunlight itself. And so to me, that is it's a misunderstanding, although it has been pushed pretty heavily by a lot of people. To me, it's pretty obvious that it's, you know, the moon is not within the blueness of the atmosphere, but rather the blueness of the atmosphere is more reflective than the unlit portion of the moon.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is that I think we're actually seeing like a projected or basically a magnified version from the actual source. You know what I mean? From our perspective.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure, definitely.
Anyway, you know something as well. Something as well.
Actual...
If you watch any high altitude balloons, okay, this is the sun, but when they're looking down, there's no blue sky. When they get past the blue sky level, that it goes up, what, 12, 15 miles. When they're above it and the
20 miles, I think.
And the camera looks down, then there's no blue sky. And also the sun in the black does not light the black up. It's still black.
No, another thing as well, if you look at them from high altitude balloon, you'll always see it's like a little dot. You know what I mean? There's no magnification on it whatsoever. So that's, I'm sure you've seen the Go Fast rocket, and the moon on that is like a little speck compared to what we see, where we see a massive disc or whatever, an oval.
Right. Well, and you also have some control in that too, because you can find videos where the sun and the moon are visible in the same high altitude footage, and the sun obviously appears like huge and massive, and then the moon appears to be basically as dim and small as a background star, although there aren't any background stars, of course, because you can't see the stars at certain altitudes, at least when the sun's out.
Yeah. And also, interesting, John, I think you mentioned on Globus the other day about, you know, the eclipses, about it not actually being a solid object, what needs to pass in front of the sun during an eclipse. Yeah, it could be actually a manifested kind of object, if you know what I mean.
Miles away.
You see when the insect stands on water and it causes that shadow effect on the water. I'm thinking... Right. I haven't quite got my head around that yet, but you know, I mean, I'm working on it.
Well, you know, at least if you look at it like a court of law, right? Let's see, the prosecution is the heliocentric team, right? Because they're the standard model. That's what everybody accepts, and the flat earthers, we're sort of the defense. So all we really have to do is, you know, show a theory that proves even a shadow of a doubt on the prosecution's theory. And so if you could prove, which we've done, and Jaron just put out a video that shows a couple different ways that shadows can be created within liquid environments, which of course the atmosphere is a liquid on the macro. But yeah, even simple surface tension, if a water bug lands on the water, that surface tension creates a little dip in the water, and that little dip puts a very dark circular shadow, which, you know, so what this does is it creates a plausible theory that the Earth or a spherical object is not the only thing that casts a circular shadow, which is the ball earther's whole claim. And then you throw into the mix the whole selenelion phenomenon and the whole idea of the sun obscuring the moon during lunar eclipses is just preposterous.
Exactly. That's what I think about the solar eclipse as well. It doesn't have to be a solid object to actually eclipse. As you know what I mean? It's... I haven't quite got there with that yet. That was just somewhat mounting around in my head. But anyway, I'll move on. So...
Oh, and you know, solar eclipses could very well be the moon obscuring the sun, and the reason being is that there's the no moon phase is always conditional of eclipses, And so that actually makes sense that the lunar phases would be caused by reflected sunlight, and that the moon would be aligned to the sun during solar eclipses. Now, of course, the moon has to be aligned to the sun while the sun is aligned in the same portion of the ecliptic, according to an observer on Earth, while the moon is in the no moon phase at that same point. That would be the condition necessary to create a solar eclipse. But the weird thing is, lunar and solar eclipses happen about the same number of times over the course of 100 years. So it seems like there is some inherent connection between solar and lunar eclipses. So perhaps, the moon creates some sort of surface tension on the atmosphere or the atmosphere itself, and it is that surface tension that sometimes casts a shadow upon the moon. It's pretty interesting stuff to think about, man.
Yeah, you probably put it out a little bit better than I could put it, but that was what I was trying to explain a little bit of. Cheers, John. So basically, on this bit, obviously I'm theorising a bit about the ether, but if you haven't got gravity, then there must be something else causing repulsion and attraction, and for me, it must be. So just basically what you say here, I just tried to theorise on what the actual ether is. You know what I mean? Looking at a bit of research and that it's a substance for the propagation of light. It's in a state of constant flux of vortex motion, carrying all the heavenly bodies according to their altitude and varying densities. This is the bit I wanted to really show you. It's made up of two posters.
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit there, Dave.
Yeah, it's just playing on that. I just wanted to show you the two star trails. Myself facing north, and the other one's captured by Paul Kofo in New Zealand, facing directly south. That to me is evidence that there's two vortices, and that's what I'm going to stick with from my observations. And I trust Paul's observations because I've seen him put the camera up himself and actually let you have a look into the camera as he's doing the time lapse. So if that's not evident that there is two vortices, then I don't know what is. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, John.
Yeah, I mean, there very well be two vortices in terms of magnetic. Absolutely. Like I said, I don't adhere to any one model. I just lean towards one in particular, and I'm open to pretty much anything. But again, I also think that there's really good evidence that this same phenomenon can be caused by a single central north pole star and atmospheric as well as electromagnetic single polar, cause the same exact effect, assuming that all of the stars, even the southernmost stars, are making large circles around Polaris. Apparently,
I've always been told to use our sensors, and what I'm doing here, I'm using my eyes.
Can I just say that those star systems, the two vortices, fit very nicely over Ceres' work?
Yeah, this is typically proof of that the circle can't happen. And actually connecting them on how the sky should work on the square map.
Yeah. Well, again, I would also. I mean, I know a couple of you guys said that you watched it, but I would just recommend that it's this part 2 of 3 of that Dr. Zach video, because what he's doing is he's taken a flat Earth projection and assuming that the stars are all concentric with Polaris, and then simply adding the atmosphere as it's using NASA's own numbers, using numbers that anyone can verify that will affect refraction, and you get the exact same effect. So it's
yeah, like I say, it can be debated, can't it? But like I say, I'm just using my eyes for this, as like I say, and what I can see from my personal research is that like I say, I originally thought that there was only one Paul, but clearly a magnet has a positive and a negative, and I think this proved to me, and a lot of people have agreed with me on this, that there could be two vortices. But anyway,
I definitely see your point, and I think it's a definite possibility, and I'm interested in pursuing all sorts of lines of thought. So I don't want to see stuck on any one model or combative or anything. And I think that it's really interesting either way. But important thing to remember is that there's our eyes and our senses only truly service on the physical plane. When you're dealing with celestial objects, there's just simply too many variables involved. That there are variables that we know and variables that we're not aware of as well. And so to try to use our senses in terms of observing celestial objects.
The whole book, the book Paul's actually explains a lot about how that actually should work. Is connecting actually into how the square map actually works. It's not really a model, but more a realm in the sense of that everything is the center. There is no edge, and it's hard to get out of the 3D box in where they have been put from child on as a perceptive thing of that is the truth, and nothing more can be truth. Anything too spiritual, too fake, etc. But you get out of that box and see who that particular spiritual level of you are. Yeah, that particular level is, and that you are all those levels already. You're just not aware of that. That's getting out of that box is as I say, only those who actually want to know. I can give the information. I can talk what I want, but when the question of what I'm actually, then yeah, pay them. They won't eat it in that sense. In that essence is his job of actually communicating between islands of opinions in that sense. It's getting someone actually on your island, seeing your island, and having no opinion or something like with things. It's just my island, and you have your island, but yeah, show you my island of how I look at things in that sense, and where we try to have these hangouts for that we actually explore each other's islands and get to know each other's islands, so we can actually expand a network of knowledge of all the individuals doing their own thing. Research in that sense.
And find is as well. There is a lot of researchers out there who actually don't do any physical research. You know what I mean? It's like I'm no scientist, you know what I mean. But what I can do is observe something, document it, and record it. You know what I mean? So, like I say, I'm not claiming to or anything like that. I'm just what I seem to do is I seem to learn as I go, if you know what I mean. So before wake up to flat Earth, I knew nothing about anything really. You know what I mean? I just went about my slave job and kids and what have you. So you know what I mean?
Yes.
I'm just like the majority of us. So like I say, I'm not claiming to know everything. All I'm saying is I'm trying to document what I see and present it, and you know what I mean. I'm not saying this is the exact facts. I'm saying, look at this. You know what I mean? It might strike a chord, and you might be able to pick up something on it and take it a bit further. And that's what I've done. And I'll keep doing this until we do eventually start putting the pieces together. And that's all I'm here for, really, to try and record and present, really. So I'll
Hey
move on.
Jen. Hey Jen,
Yeah.
how do you see the sun and the moon moving across the plane? Do you still think they circle around a concentric north?
Yeah, I mean, I think it appears that's still a viable possibility. Sure.
Yeah, and that's why you'll find that the A map is very accurate.
What's this video? I don't know if you saw the last link I actually posted in the chat.
Sorry, I put something on my phone. Sorry, carry on.
That's why, John. Obviously, you'll find that the A map is very, very accurate in the northern hemisphere. Like, you know what I mean? Because if you look at that northern vortex where the sun and moon move around it, they actually do what's actually happens on the actual map. If you understand what I'm saying, it's like I say, it's when you get across that equator into the south where things start going a bit pear shaped.
Well, I figured out how the AE projection got screwed up, and I'm not smart enough to fix it. I'm not a cartographer, but here's how it got screwed up. Like I mentioned earlier, the prior to Columbus's, quote unquote discovery of America, he was heading west from France, and he was looking for the east of India, basically trying to land somewhere around where the Japanese islands would be. And so whatever maps they had prior to discovering America would have been completely incomplete. So they certainly did not have a globe model prior to the 1500s, which is when indeed you see the first globes. Now, furthermore, Mercator never could have been able to make a complete projection until the United States was found, and the west coast of the same continent was found coming from east of India, and then the two meet in the middle to know that they're actually on the same place. And that didn't happen really for hundreds of years until after Mercator made, let me put it this way, California was still being mapped for hundreds of years after Mercator made the projection. And so the problem is that what they did is they took of latitude at different longitudes in the northern hemisphere historically, and that was done for ages. And when circumnavigation was discovered in the late 1400s, then and what they did is they basically clone stamped the latitudes at different northern longitudes directly onto the bottom portion of a hypothetical globe, and to base all of their measurements of southern regions, and it's the Mercator projection, and it is that very flaw which is also transferred into the AE projection. And so we just have a faulty idea of the map.
See, on a globe, the lines of latitude will get smaller as a map. They will actually go further south.
Yeah, well, there's good evidence that
the photographic side of Google Maps, that the photographic material actually shows what the format is, what the size is, what the are. You do is actually hide it through GPS coordinations.
Yeah, what I was going to say is there's pretty good evidence that was documented in the original Zetetic astronomy that was written, everybody knows, by Robotham in 1865. But and I can find you the chapter and section that it's in or whatever. But basically, using the charts and using the books of actual mariners circumnavigated far south regions, their reckoning basically had the distances between an average of 45 degrees south at somewhere just slightly less of a circumference ring than the equator. And so there's no possible way on a sphere, of course, that the 45 degrees south could be anywhere near the circumference of the equator, let alone larger than the circumference of the equator. However, this evidence supports a circular model where everything is concentric with the North Pole.
John, what's your
There's
take
lots
on
of evidence for
pyramids
support.
then? What's your take on pyramids? What's your take on pyramids?
When you actually circumference the equator, 24,901 miles, that as north or as south at as high latitude as possible, and I will tell you, you're circumnavigating the same distance because it's both perfect square, which you keep circling. Actually, that the circle is not impossible, or not possible, and the ball is not possible. It's unadjustable as the photographic material actually shows, and even with beyond north and south, that's sorry, they can't fool me any longer in that sense.
What's your take
Anyway,
on?
I'm going to move on a little bit because I've got to go in about 10 minutes. So my missus is waiting to go to bed, and I'm actually in the bedroom on the computer. So, but Karen, what were you going to say?
That's okay, Dave.
Karen?
Yeah, carry on.
Oh, Karen, I thought you
Carry
wanted
on.
to say-
Oh, do you want me to
Okay,
just?
so-
I was just going to say you can answer it afterwards, but I just wanted your take on pyramids then, and how they all work and what that was about, because they came before us.
You know, I've pretty wild theories on pyramids, but you know, the thing is, pyramids are found all over the world. It's not just, there are a couple things in Egypt. There's similar construction between pyramids in Egypt and pyramids in South America, like the pyramids, the Temple of the Moon and Sun. It's estimated that, well, first of all, South America is huge, and the number of monolithic or pyramid sites in South America, they've only discovered and documented about 10% of the total. And there's a lot to be discovered in South America. There's pyramids in Crimea. There's pyramids in China. The Great Pyramids themselves are obviously a big mystery, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Christopher Dunn's work, and there's a few scientists and engineers that have done work on the Great Pyramids, and basically figured out that at least the Great Pyramids at Giza were essentially some form of a free energy device. And in fact, Nikola Tesla is said to have borrowed a lot of his ideas, for free energy from the ancient cultures. And it appears that prior to some cataclysmic event, perhaps, maybe it was a great flood that's told of in all ancient cultures. Maybe it was something else, but a cataclysmic event wiped out a civilization that essentially had pyramids worldwide that could have supported wireless electricity and wireless communication using the Earth's natural electromagnetic fields, just like we do today, by the way. We don't use satellites, we use the same thing. However, they could have, it seems like they were very highly advanced, and I mean, they want people to believe that they're tombs and all this nonsense, but to me, it's evidence of a pre-ancient civilization that was probably far more technologically advanced than us, and they were simply harvesting, in some cases, harvesting the energy from the Earth itself. The Earth basically holds a static electric charge, and with every gain in altitude, you gain 100 volts per meter in electric potential. And so that's why Tesla built his towers very tall, and that's why the pyramids are very tall. And even the Great Pyramids were like, they had, I believe it was gold and very high conductive metals on the top, and the outer layers were constructed of more of an insulating stone, which has now all been ripped off, and then the interior limestone was more of a little bit more conductive of a stone. And this is talking about piezoelectric current. It's a little bit different form of electricity than we use, but what they're doing is basically harvesting energy, harvesting electricity right out of the ether, just like Nikola Tesla did, and to make cover up.
Actually tapping into the actual energy flows were there already. Instead of actually the burning stuff, the old coal
Fossil fuels
movement, the old way of actually generating energy through the frequencies who are already there. It's tapping into generates enough EMF energy to actually form. And if you have a unit to actually tap into the whole frequency of the AC matter what frequency that is, because there is a frequency there, it causes an EMF field, what you can actually use to short with the Earth, in where you can create a circuit with an antenna around that EMF field, what is actually generating energy for an AC current, which you can make DC to have another circuit run on it, load a battery, and burn other direct current lamps instead of AC current lamps.
Series. I think Dave wants to go in a minute. Can we watch, because he's waited patiently to play the rest of his video, and then afterwards carry on about the pyramids. But I think Dave wants to go.
So what I did here, then I've used a couple of my own time lapses to capture the moon in Star Trails, and I've used a couple of friends as well. So basically, I've just as it says there, I've captured the moon. So I'll let you run and show you what I'm on about. So as you can see there, the moon, it's above the celestial equator, and it's on the northern vortex, and it follows a very similar pattern. Then what you'll notice is when it's on the actual celestial equator, to be above the celestial equator, the moon lives a straight line. As you can see, it's just slightly above there. I think the star below it, the line below it, is probably somewhere near the celestial equator. And then, friend from Portugal, Jose, celestial equator. It follows the patterns of the stars again. And this is one I robbed off somebody where it just the actual sun over.
This one should be for the moon.
But he reckons it's the sun, but show you the actual where they separate and where the actual moon and probably the sun is passes over from one current onto the next current. That's where my research is taking me like. And as you can see, the bottom bit, the small arch, when the moon's furthest south, that's the exact pattern. You know what I mean? It'll rise further south, and it'll just be probably obviously it'll set a lot quicker, and as it moves further north, obviously it goes in a pretty straight line. But we know that when it's on the equator, it'll rise at 90 degrees and set at 270, and then obviously when it's above, it'll probably be greeting you at 58 degrees east northeast and setting at 300 degrees west northwest. Because like I say, I believe it's there is two vortices, and it does get picked up on them currents, and that's why it does come from the south. When it's in New Zealand, they have to look south to greet the southern vortex furthest north, and we look north to greet it. That's the equator. I know you can always fraction, but it is more perpendicular with the north, if you know what I mean, when it's on the actual. And
what I would just say is I've seen, and I described it earlier, and I'm not arguing your point or anything. What I'm saying though is I've seen a similar effect taken from far north, where Polaris was not 90 degrees overhead, but probably 60 degrees over in the corner of the frame, and the equatorial stars were not even visible above the horizon, and you got this same effect. So that leads me to believe that what you're saying could indeed be extremely valid. Although the stars, what we see as the stars is very subjective due to a number of things, and I think that the moon is something altogether different than the stars. But sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's okay. But like I say, you can see that the moon does follow a very similar pattern to the stars. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
so
that's interesting.
So do you guys believe that the sun, moon, and stars are actually tangible? Are they physical objects, or are they projections of physical objects?
I think that the moon and wandering stars may actually be physical objects. Although I'm not sure. Obviously, I've never been to any of them, but that is sort of what I lean towards. And it seems to me that the sun is a electromagnetic phenomenon, and the stars are something completely different. Who knows? It could be like sonic luminescence or something altogether different. Who knows?
Do you believe that the moon's transparent? Do you believe the moon's transparent?
No.
Due to the atmosphere. It's only transparent due to the atmosphere. It's like a mountain from far away. It'll look transparent too. If you look at the tip of a mountain, if you're looking through loads of layers of atmosphere, it will appear. I think it's the same effect.
If you ask me, you're looking into the center point of where the toroidal fields come together as a funnel through where you're actually looking into the other side. For the moon, you can see it because it's a laser light, and for the moon, it's just blinding because you can't see it. But the focal point within itself is where the light itself is. Out over half the Earth from the height, and where we can perceive it on our perspective bubble makes how we can see it on every position anywhere.
So that's where I am in my research, and that's just obviously what I put there is what I've observed, and whether it's right or wrong, I'm just hoping that my research and my observations can put a little bit of the pieces together of this massive jigsaw. That's where I am really. Like I say, I'm not saying it's the exact truth. I'm just observing, recording, and presenting what I see. And like I say, somebody with a bit more brains than me, or somebody might think, oh, that's interesting. You know what I mean? They'll do a bit of research in it and put another piece of the puzzle together. And that's what I've been doing. Like I say, I was a big supporter of the circling map, but at this moment in time, I'm not on all whatsoever. I'm just gonna build my research up on, and then hopefully the pieces will be put together in a few years, or however long it takes.
Yeah, well said.
So when we see the sun and the moon, they're not actually, they're projections of an actual sun and the moon.
I believe
there's no way
our viewpoint they are, yeah, because obviously.
I was gonna say I have a full moon and sun out right now, and you'll have a full moon over in the UK, right? And there's no way I'm seeing a moon that's 3,600 miles horizontal atmosphere from my point to your point.
Yeah.
Okay. So each see our own star field and our own moon and our sun within our own area.
Yeah, exactly.
You would agree with that then?
Yeah, absolutely.
take your family down to the beach one day or to a big body of water and near the sunset when you get that line coming from the sun, and get your family spread out across the beach and ask them all where's the sun pointing.
There's a shot I took the other day. It's quite a nice shot.
Do you see the
What I
blue
did-
front of the moon?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the atmosphere. It's strictly the atmosphere. The sunlight scatters. There's almost a chemical reaction between the solar radiation and our atmosphere, which causes the atmosphere itself to become bright blue, opaque, reflective, and the moon is not in that blue sky. The high gain light of the moon is penetrating the reflectivity of the blue sky, and the darkened portion of the moon is gradually being drowned out by the sky itself.
So what do you think causes ambient light?
Maybe 2 miles, overhead.
What do you think
What's
causes
interesting?
ambient light then? Or Dave?
In terms of, I'm sorry, it's ambient light in terms of.
Other than the sunlight, what do you think makes the sky blue when it's daytime?
I think it's definitely sort of a chemical reaction between solar radiation and our atmosphere, which is consists of lots of different gases and chemicals.
What's
Yeah,
interesting? What's interesting here? There's like a raised bit on the moon, which I spotted the other day. If you look carefully, just where my mouse is there, right there. It's when I drop the contrast on the actual image itself, you can really make out that it looks like it's like a big chunk sticking out of the actual moon. It's quite interesting actually.
You know that Preston on our group, Dave, he put the moon as flat, and then George
Well, if you look at our shot,
George took some amazing pictures where your mouse was just there. That the moon is not round. That there's quite a jagged edge. It's got quite a lot of angles on it.
well, it depends. It will be a jagged edge when it's near the terminator line because it always is. What you'll find is as the terminator line moves away from it, that's where you get the expression waxing from. Because if you look at it, it looks like it's melted wax kind of thing. You know what I mean? But it's just what gets me, just how sharp that actual edge is. Just a ridiculous sharp edge. Do you know what I mean? It's like I say, you can see that raised area again there.
When Preston did his one as well, all he could see was like hexagons. I saw triangles all over the moon.
So as well, what I did, I'm doing this. I'm doing a different technique of shooting the moon. I'm cheating really. What I'm doing, because I've got the Nikon Coolpix B700, it can shoot in 2160 Ultra HD. So what I do, I actually shoot it in, and then you can actually remove a frame from the actual video itself. It's got an option to actually remove the frame. So what I do, I shoot it in Ultra HD, then I remove a frame. A sharp image. Like when you take it with a camera, normally at 20 megapixels, quite as sharp as a details. But like I say, it's a bit of a crude way of taking a picture, but I find it quite effective.
Yeah.
Do you think that if it was a ball, do you think if it was a ball, the pictures would look different? Dave?
Well, yeah, it's so with the moon, it does look spherical when if you take a full moon and you on certain times, when you do get that little bit of a terminator edge, it's about 98%. It does give it that spherical look. But when you get a moon, it just looks like basically like a disc shape. Vision from our perspective, because there's so much going on up there with light and shadows and things like that. It's difficult to say whether it's a solid object, whether it's a disc, whether it's
Can
a
I just
sphere,
say,
whether it's a
Dave?
rod.
Can I just say my last like NASA fake video? I think I put the link to John. That's the one I sent him. You can actually see with NASA's footage that the moon is a disc and it turns on its side. They're using a disc. NASA are
I've
using a
never
disc.
seen that. Yeah. I don't believe much that comes from NASA. And to tell you the truth, I think that to me it's irrelevant whether the moon is a sphere or a disk. And I think that what's happened is arguing whether the moon is flat or a disk is irrelevant to the conversation because, of course, a lot of people use the logic, well, the moon is a sphere and the sun is a sphere, therefore the earth must be a sphere. We know the earth is flat, but I don't think that necessarily means that the moon is flat. Now, it could be flat, but I still think the moon could be spherical, and that 100% thing to do with the shape of the earth. And honestly, I don't think that, well, we may have an answer to this one day, but I just don't think it's physically possible to go to the moon and actually test it and figure out what it is, what it's made of. I really believe it's beyond our capacity.
Can I just say something, Dave? How far is it your camera sees?
I don't know, to be honest. It's times 60 zoom, so
238,000 miles.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm sorry. You can get Jupiter in there too, so it could see 365 million miles.
You were talking about eclipses earlier, John. Not to interrupt, but why do you think eclipses are just localized, seen in certain parts of the world, and not all over?
Because the sun and moon are much smaller and closer than we've been told.
Okay.
Yeah. Or at least apparently, apparent sun and apparent moon are much smaller and closer. And, I put this out in a video recently, but, solar eclipse signatures. So like the shadow that the moon casts forms like a wave pattern during the totality of the event. It's called an eclipse signature. But usually the shadow of the moon is like 50 miles in diameter. But during some total solar eclipses that annular moon is like 2 miles in diameter. So that's just crazy, especially humor in the heliocentric model. But listen, guys, I got to run. I'm about 3 hours late for dinner, so I'm going to grab me something to eat. But it was really cool guys and hanging out. And anytime you want to, get in touch, just let me know.
Okay, John. Thank you very much for stopping by, buddy.
Thank you very much.
You guys.
Thank you very much for that.
Actually, if you want to watch my presentation as well, so you can actually talk about the information itself and see where.
I've opened up all the links that were put into the chat, so I'll try to watch through these, in my spare time,
John, can I just say we've added you to Sun and Moon, and this presentation is in the pinned post of Sun and Moon. You're added. We're called Flat Earth. What we called Sun and Moon log kept by the real people, because obviously we started off as taking compass readings, so that's why that name is that. But in the pinned post, where the compass readings are, because obviously we have a folder for each month now to put the readings in, series is presentations in that.
Okay, cool.
Oh yeah, there's a library of readings to look through as well if you're interested.
So I've added you to the group and I've welcomed you. I've welcomed you on the group. But I say in the pinned post is series' presentation.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, sometimes I just wish there was 2 of me or more hours in a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right, guys, I'm going to have to shoot as well. It was nice speaking to you all, and it was nice talking to you again, John.
Thanks, Dave.
Absolutely.
I'm nice meeting you, but I haven't seen you before. Karen's group, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, he is.
All right. Yeah. Well, I've got to go because it's like 1:30 and my missus will be.
Sorry. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks a lot for stopping by, buddy. I enjoyed your video.
Oh,
So
he's
looking
gone now.
forward to anything you put out. So. Oh, okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, interesting. If you go on my channel, I did an interesting video where I shot the moon and Sirius in the same focus. That's quite an interesting video because I was trying to shot us and the moon in the exact same focal range as. So that's an interesting video as well. Right, I'm going to have to go, guys, because my missus is going to kill me.
Bye, Dave. Thank you very much.
Right.
Okay, Dave.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. See you all.
Bye, Dave. Can I just say for what we're doing, I've been recording now for 4 hours and 20 minutes. So just for the group, I'm going to end it now. So everybody say goodbye, but we'll carry on talking. Everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
Everyone. Cool.
I forgot you was there. You've been so quiet again.
Bye, everybody.